One day, trouble will knock on the door and then Grace will lock the door tightly. It was a bright sunny day. The sun's rays fell on the big gray house. All the servants bowed before Lady Grace as she walked majestically towards one of them. The gray-haired man bowed his head excitedly to Lady Grace. Mrs. Grace wore luxurious earrings and a necklace with blue gemstones. The girl sternly asked the servant why the house was in such a mess. From birth, she had everything that others could only dream of. Grace was the only daughter of the Duke of Winostine, who was highly regarded by the imperial family. She grew up as the heiress of the house, gifted with the beauty and charisma she inherited from her father. But most importantly, she had the power to protect everything she had. Grace stands in high heels at the head of a lying man. A girl crushes the head of one of the three men who are lying on the floor with her foot, holding a sword in her hands. All the guests in business attire look at Grace in shock. She asks with a menacing look whether they have ever seen people being beaten before. That day, the girl fought with 17 noblemen at once. For this, Grace was punished by the Duke and sent to a distant region. Although such measures would have forced many to fall to their knees and beg for farewell, the Duke's daughter only hated her father. She swore that she would throw every potato of the harvest in his face, proudly toiling in the new distant lands. Returning home, she asks without great surprise about her father's new marriage. The servant confirms the news. His eyes slightly worried, he tells that the Duke has fallen in love with a young dancer of a different social status. But at the time the Duke married Grace's mother, the dancer was also pregnant. He discovered that the dancer was in fact a former duchess who had been unjustly driven away 20 years ago. Grace's mother was branded a terrible villain by high society, and the Duke feared that his daughter would be in great shock when she found out about it. Grace immediately asks where her father is, realizing that the Duke didn't care about his daughter's feelings, as much as she could cause a stir in the estate. Grace stood by a large window with beautiful curtains on which 2 large flowers were adorned. She is surprised by the joke, asking the maids about it sarcastically, adjusting her hair and looking out the window. The new head maid begins to argue with her, in Grace's opinion, saying that the girl has no right to challenge the Duke's decision, which greatly irritates her. Another servant stands up for her, shouting that she is the heir to the house and has every right to dispose of it. The new head maid also objects to him, reproaching him that the Duke's decision has already been made and cannot be disputed. Grace asks if she even knows what the drawing is. The new head maid tells Grace that it is a tulip. Grace harshly accuses her of saying that the heir to the house has no right to speak out, while the mark of their family's enemy defaces the walls of the estate. The new maid, bowing her head obediently, again says that the Duke has approved of tulips decorating the walls of the estate, closing her eyes and wrinkling her face in displeasure. The 2 girls exchange angry glances, and Grace waits for a response to her indignation about the tulips on display in the estate from the new head maid, who looks at her angrily. Grace talks about the insolence of the new head maid, because she didn't even introduce herself and thinks she has the right to confront the heiress of the family. Grace doesn't react to this in any way, continuing to stand in the same place with her arms crossed. But immediately, a smile appears on her face, and she says that it will be necessary to deal with more than just her father. The new head maid's whole face was twisted with the most mixed emotions. Grace asks the new head maid where her personal maid is, while all the other maids stand behind the head maid, and is told that she works in the stables. Grace learns from the new head maid that the Duke himself transferred the girl's personal maid to the stables. The heiress still does not give in, and threatens the maids to bring her the old maid. The new head maid just watches Grace as she walks up the massive staircase. Grace is greeted by a servant at the luxurious door, bowing before her. The blonde man at the office desk asks in surprise about Grace's return. The girl looks at the walls and the entire office with bewilderment. These 2 red-haired girls are wearing beautiful clothes with lots of jewelry. Grace asks to explain what is happening at the estate. The man answers her by asking if Butler told her about this. She replies that Butler told her everything, but she is still perplexed. The man asks Grace again if he should explain himself to her. Grace says that it is very painful for her and even more offensive to hear such words from her father. The father tells his daughter that she can change her mind before dinner and reminds her that she shares the same guilt with her mother. She still asks for forgiveness for herself and her mother, but also says that otherwise her father will spend his whole life atoning for his guilt before her and her mother. Grace suddenly hears something and her focus changes very quickly. Right in front of her, a girl with red hair and a big, beautiful pink dress falls. She falls straight to the floor, very sharply and unexpectedly, screaming in fear. Grace looks at the frightened girl with stern eyes, and she looks back at her very guiltily. Grace looks at her father, eager to hear an explanation for this whole situation. The Duke shouts the red-haired girl's name, rising abruptly and rushing to her aid. He helps her up, asking if she's okay as Grace watches the scene in silence. She immediately assumed that she was the daughter of the dancer, whom she had seen with her in those paintings. The Duke asks if Kadia can stand up. She tells him that she was just scared and stumbled, calling him daddy. Grace just exhales nervously, looking sternly from the side at the two of them, while her father again accuses her, but she disputes her father's next reproach. At the door, Grace meets Kadia's mother, who is surprised by this. The girl still looks sternly even at the lady she saw in the picture that surprised her, expecting to hear new explanations. The dancer apologizes that their first meeting was so chaotic and abrupt, justifying it by the fact that her daughter Kadia could not contain her curiosity. Grace's father introduces her to her new mother Milena and sister Kadia, asking her to treat them with respect. Grace asks them to leave, not even wanting to talk to them, leaving without waiting for an answer. The Duke shouts at the top of his lungs after Grace, extremely irritated. Grace runs into a room where the only light comes from the hallway. She takes off her long elbow-length gloves. Long black gloves fall to the floor in a sharp throw from Grace. There is a new assumption in her head that Milena and Kadia could have been victims of her father. Grace sat up, clutching her head, which was full of nerves and new experiences. She told herself that she would become an heir, and she should not worry about all this because there is no need for attachments. She tenderly calls her lady and smiles warmly, sparks sparkling in her eyes. Elena beams with happiness after a long separation from Grace, talking about how much time has passed. The maid notices her mistress's loss of weight and cannot hold back her tears, crossing her hands under her chin. Grace admits that she was very tired yesterday and notes to herself how pleasant it was for her to see a familiar face. Elena brings a cute breakfast with sweets and 2 sandwiches, next to which are heart-shaped cookies. Grace, dressed in white robes with a large necklace around her neck, decorated with white stones that match her shirt, looks thoughtfully. Grace expresses a bad opinion of the new headmaid, saying that she thought her food would be ruined by the new headmaid, calling it dirty methods. Elena reassures her mistress that the kitchen's composition has not changed, and that she herself took the food. Grace is relieved by this news, as she says she won't have to get rid of another group of servants. Aliona, horrified by these words, asks again about her mistress's intentions. She tries to say in a frightened voice that there is a very unpleasant rumor going around in high society. Grace gathers her beautiful blonde hair into a high ponytail, ordering her to prepare for the trip to the imperial palace. The sun's rays decorate the houses, a clear day flows through the empire. Grace kisses the princess's hand, kneeling in the shadows while all the light goes to the princess herself. The princess says that she canceled the hunt with him when she heard about Grace's arrival. According to the princess, what happened in Grace's family was the scandal of the century. Grace doesn't believe it, and is sure that her mother wouldn't do something like that. And in response, the princess asks what supports such great confidence. Grace chooses that her confidence is based on logic, since wanting to get rid of the dancer and her daughter, her mother would deal with them forever. Grace's mother ran the emperor's household before the wedding and was known for her attention to detail. The princess says she doesn't have time to investigate and find an excuse for Grace's mother when her only excuse is her daughter's words. Grace responds by saying that she doesn't need her mother's help, but that her father wants to change the heir. The princess thought that Grace could so easily lose her title of heiress because of a girl who had been here less than a year, speaking of the weakness of the Duke's daughter. Grace denies accusations of weakness, but notes that her support is no longer as strong as it used to be, and therefore this creates many difficulties for her affairs. In response to the princess's question, Grace says that she must help her because she is the Winoston family. The princess admits that when the Winoston family is mentioned, she always remembers Grace and considers her a true representative of the house. The princess sadly admits that hard times are coming. Grace responds that all life is an eternal struggle. The princess speaks of her hope for Grace's victory. The princess's opinion of Grace was not spoiled by the rumors, which pleased her. Grace walks through the estate in a luxurious suit with lots of jewelry. Grace comes closer and asks the stranger himself who he is. The guy in the plain gray shirt turns to look at Grace. The guy immediately disappears and sits on a tree near the palace windows. Grace is greeted by servants who bow before her. The servants became very excited and waited for at least some words. The maid replies with an evil grin that Madame Meryl is teaching her now. Grace directly asks the maid if Meryl beats Alina in the garden. The maid's appearance immediately becomes worse, and her skin turns pale from fear. Grace already asks the maid again with a fierce grin. Grace walks through the tall doors to meet the other maids. The head maid scolds Alice, telling her that her place is on the farm and that she should not be deceived by Mistress Grace's kindness. Alice bowed before all the maids, trying to justify herself as best she could. The head maid was already ready to start beating Alice with a huge whip. Grace enters the room and all the maids, especially Alice, who was ready to scream at the top of her lungs, immediately changed their faces. The head maid greeted Mistress Grace, which made it clear that she had manners. But despite that, she still did not deserve respect. Grace gave the head maid a sharp look that did not mean anything good for the maid. Grace kicked the chair so hard that it fell to the floor, and the maid fell to the floor like Alice herself, whom she had wanted to hit a minute ago. After kicking the chair, the girl asked the maid for a chair for herself. The maid with dark green hair runs in a hurry to fulfill the order. The head maid, rising with the help of another maid, with a furious face, accuses her mistress of not behaving like this for ladies and calls Grace a criminal. All the maids are horrified. Even the head maid is horrified by the words of their mistress. Grace replies that the head maid might consider her a criminal and sarcastically asks what the maid will do, making it clear that she is powerless before the heiress. The head maid tries to argue with Grace, who sees through the maid's motives. The maid failed to convince her mistress and, in Grace's opinion, deserved punishment. The whip flies high with a large swing and at a very fast speed. The whip passed straight across the head maid's neck and shoulder. She says that she is really annoying the maid, to which Alice suggests that it is very likely due to rumors about Grace's mother. Alice asks if everything will be okay. Her mistress replies that nothing will be okay. The maid immediately suggests that she apologize to the Duke. Alice asks her if she would like to speak with Lady Valeria, to which Grace responds positively. Lady Valeria is a beautiful girl with blue eyes and ash blonde hair that matches her large earrings with stones of a similar shade. Lady Valeria greets Grace by running out of the carriage, her heels flashing in a beautiful voluminous dress. The girls are drowning in welcoming hugs, both very happy to see each other. Grace replies that Valeria will ruin her makeup, but she replies that it is waterproof, joking that she has been living under a rock all this time. The girls went into a large room which had 2 small sofas with a table for tea drinking. Valeria complains about the tiring image that is difficult to maintain all the time. Grace continues the topic with humorous words that she begins to think that Valeria has 2 personalities and that her sudden appearance was unexpected. In response, she says that rumors will start if she doesn't show up. They remind each other that they are an example of friendship for everyone and that they themselves are a white and red rose, Adelita. She is also always polite and kind-hearted, which is greatly appreciated by those around her. But this is only her image. Since childhood, she had to pretend so as not to become a threat to the heir. She pretends that she is not interested in family affairs, but focusing on relations with the nobility, she portrays a naive girl. They began to discuss the situation with rumors about a new heir. Grace is only interested in the risk that they will be confirmed. Grace's problem is that the Duke is overly interested in his new wife and her daughter, which really irritates the heiress. People don't really know anything about the new Duchess, but Valeria was ordered by the imperial family to dispel all the bad rumors about the Duke's new wife. But it is known about Katia that she spends time only with little-known nobles or people without any titles at all. She also rejects all attempts to propose to her. There are no clear signs that she wants to become an heir yet, but she would not show it. Grace heard everything she wanted and asks for a favor so that Valeria could study her family's case from 20 years ago. Valeria asks again about the accusations brought against Grace's mother and what the Duke thinks about it. They come to the conclusion that there are already rumors about this, and people should talk about it. Valeria reluctantly says that it will be difficult to carry out, especially since there are great risks if people find out that she is helping the villain. Grace offers a plan for making good money that will bring a lot of profit, and Valeria can use the money to improve her reputation. Valeria agrees and decides to find out what plan Grace has prepared. She says it's time to start making a plan, to which Valeria is horrified and screams accusations at the girl. Grace justifies herself by saying that she returned only a couple of days ago, to which Valeria blackmails her, saying that she will not help until she receives something worthwhile. Valeria agrees with a smile and says that she already likes it. After Valeria's departure, the Duke invites Grace to dinner, but she finds this dinner unwelcome, and in response to her father's remark, she is rude to him. The head maid glares at Grace, letting her know she told the Duke everything, and he, in turn, immediately blames his daughter for this act. However, Grace pretends that she did nothing, even asking about it, did she do something to them? She replies that she doesn't even remember anything like that. The Duke slams the table in a terrible scream while Katia tries to somehow calm him down. Katia says that Meryl told her everything, calling Grace's actions yesterday very evil. Grace, adjusting her hair, replies that there was a reason for that. Everyone was shocked by these details. The Duke sat back down in his seat from strangulation. Kadia asked the head maid with concern about Alice's beating. She begins to make excuses in fear and lie that it was a well-deserved act. Grace called the head maid's words complete nonsense, reminding her that she had never hit a servant for no reason in all her time. The head maid was speechless at Grace's precise remark. Something suddenly caught Grace's eye, and she immediately looked away. Kadia stood to the side, calming down 2 recently fired maids. Grace shouted at the maids to leave, which frightened them. Katia interrupted Grace and said that it was her fault for defending the handmaids. Grace is not happy that her father is scolding her for punishing 2 maids when she is still the heir to the family. Grace assumed that her father never loved her mother or her. Grace remembered being told that someone wanted to take her place. The Duke was forced to admit this inconvenient truth with hostility. No one will be able to build a huge fortress around the Venoston house. No one can protect this family except Grace. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Grace sat alone while everyone else was together, not far from each other. Suddenly, Milena told the headmaid to apologize to Grace, which discouraged her father and herself. Through clenched teeth, the headmaid still apologized to Grace. Grace, with a smug grin, ordered her to personally apologize to Elena. Grace's gaze fell on the excited maids. Luckily for them, she decided to reconsider their dismissal, but warned that this was their last chance. Their faces immediately changed, and they were happier than ever. Grace stood up gracefully, leaning on one hand and putting the other behind her back, from her seat and prepared to leave. But suddenly for Grace, Kadia called out to her very happily. She took Grace's hand and offered to have dinner with them. The invitee was not particularly happy, unlike the initiator of the joint dinner. Grace decided to stay to get to know the red-haired girl better. The family sat around a table filled with delicious food, Kadia and her daughter sitting across from Grace while her father sat to the side. Grace was served 3 fried crab legs. Milena said that in future she would monitor the headmaid's behavior more closely. Kadia said that the Duke, by calling her daddy, agreed with everything her mother said by calling her mommy, and she most likely did not know about the problem. Grace thinks that Kadia is bragging about her father's love for her mother. Grace stated that the girl does not need to be like her and should not follow her example. Kadia hesitated at Grace's abrupt statement but continued speaking. Grace looked up from her meal, paying attention to the girl's words. Kadia said that she wanted to be considered a noble lady too. The faces of everyone present turned gloomy for a moment, and an awkward pause hung in the room. The girl asked in surprise what Grace was talking about. She said that she did not need to learn etiquette because noble birth is determined not only by this. Grace's father remained silent, his face stone-faced. Grace found Kadia more interesting than she thought. The parents of the family were happily discussing something at the table, forgetting about Grace and Kadia. Kadia stared at Grace silently. Kadia thought about something, looking at her with obvious fear. Suddenly, the father distracted the girl and asked what she would like to receive as a birthday present. Grace thought about the fact that her father didn't even remember when her birthday was. Kadia replied with a smile that she didn't need anything and that she already had everything. After her father asked again, she thought about it and finally named what she wanted. It was Grace's library. Grace's library was enormous, one of the largest in any noble family. Grace allowed Kadia to take the library, saying that she already had all the books she needed. She replies that she just wants to make a debut for Kadia. After all, this is Kadia's first birthday as a member of their family. Kadia just remains awkwardly silent, not saying anything. Milena claps her hands in delight and approves of Grace's idea, saying that it is wonderful. The Duke asks for Kadia's consent. She agrees, but says that she does not know if she deserves it. It is decided that the celebration will take place, and Grace gracefully rises from the table. Alice asks Grace about the reasons for the Duke's concerns. When the lady asks about other options, the maid says that she can try to pretend to be nice and please him with this, as Milena does. Grace proudly declares that she does not even want to serve because she is an heiress, and flattery is best left to those who admit that there are those who are better than them. Alice nervously tries to tell Grace something, but her mistress doesn't even answer her. Grace stands and signs a long letter without being distracted by anything. She begins to open up about how she struggles every day to be stronger, surprising Alice, who decides to ask her again. Grace admits that it was only in this way, with her hard-earned influence, that she could fight back against those who mocked her. Smiling, as if prompting some reasoning, Grace asks Alice if there would be any reason to try so hard without all this. Grace promises that she will always protect herself, passing the letter in an envelope into Alice's hands. She orders the maid to send a letter to Count Luxon's house. Grace looks into the large mirror, looking at her reflection, trying to think about everything. Beauty always fades with age, and power is of no importance in front of those of higher status. Therefore, only Grace herself can save herself. Only Grace is responsible for her life, and she is the rule and law for herself until the very end. So she must surpass anyone who challenges her. Already at the estate of Count Luxon on a sunny day, the maid delivers a letter from the Venoston house, for which her mistress thanks her. Valeria, with a smirk after reading the letter, calls Grace a fox. She asks the maid to bring the paper to draw up the contract and someone to help with the details, because she and Grace are going to start their own business. He also asks the maid to buy silk and prepare the best fabrics. A large order is being prepared. Valeria answers about the rapid growth in demand for clicks. It is unpleasant for her to admit it, but it will work. Grace doesn't know what's in fashion now, which doesn't surprise her longtime friend, because it's Grace who sets the fashion. Although Valeria is irritated by this, she sincerely hopes and wishes Grace good luck. Preparations are in full swing at Weinoston Manor, with everyone busily preparing and working. Everyone worked hard to celebrate the birth of Kadia. Even Madame Muriel had stopped arguing with Grace at this time, but her eyes still showed contempt and resentment. But Grace no longer came to family dinners and hardly saw Kadia. It's been a few days since preparations for Kadia's birthday. The princess once again officially recognized Grace as her imperial guard. She orders her to get up and admits that she is very glad to see her. Grace stands up and says with respect and valor that it is an honor for her. The princess replies that the rumors she heard were true, to which Grace asks her again. She says that they say that one must at least once see the beauty of Grace Winston in person. Otherwise, life cannot be called complete. Grace hastens to say that she is flattered. Grace has a task for the princess, to which she immediately replies that she is waiting for an order. About 200 years ago, there was a belief in the empire that people with scarlet hair would bring death to the imperial family. The princess shares the emperor's thoughts that the disappearances are connected to a belief. Grace says it's just a rumor. But the Weinoston family is inextricably linked to the imperial family, so rumors harm both families. Grace suggests that the Manhwa house is connected to all this, since they have magic. She talks about the difficulty. If the magicians are involved in this matter, the mysterious guy is eavesdropping on their conversation. The princess invited for this occasion someone who could be useful and help them. Grace turns around and looks at the guy who came out of the column he was hiding behind. She is not delighted with this picture, and does not particularly try to hide it, looking sternly at the young man. The princess introduces Grace's boyfriend. His name is Riku, and he is a commoner. It was already evening, and a crimson light enveloped the manual. Grace walks up the stairs with Alice, her head held high while her maid awkwardly tilts her thin chin down slightly. Grace remembers Riku's words that he doesn't need the rules of the palace, and that he himself is a commoner and a magician. Alice asks about the lady's condition. She only replies that she remembered one strange eccentric. Grace looks at the open doors at the end of the hallway. She immediately asked if anyone had arrived at the estate. Alice replied that a tailor had arrived to help Kadia prepare for the holiday. Milena notices Grace returning, walking in front of the corridor. The woman immediately calls her, joyfully speaking of her return. She offers to help choose an outfit for Kadia, inviting Grace to participate. The heiress doesn't want to at all, but she needs to know approximately what clothes will be at the celebration. Grace doesn't even try to hide her shock and asks directly what is this on Kadia. Kadia's beautiful dress still evokes mixed emotions in Grace. Kadia shows up in a new dress for Grace to see how she likes it. The tailor is confident that Kadia's dress fits perfectly and asks Grace's opinion. Grace sarcastically asks if the Manhwa family paid him, and Kadia looks like a burning pine tree. The tailor, stuttering, justifies himself by saying that Milena approved of this outfit. Milena asks Grace. She replies that the dress is too flashy, thinking to herself that Milena will not choose any more dresses. At that time, Grace was sitting in the room opposite Kadia and Milena. Milena was eager to introduce Grace to a couple of the servants, apologizing for having to do it earlier. Two very similar maids walked into the room. Milena introduces Eily and Baron, saying that she recommended them herself. Grace looks at the inspired Milena with an angry, cold expression. The girl begins to remember the latest events, thoughts running through her head, and she has a bad feeling. But there is no time for investigation. Grace leaves the room. Grace decides that she needs to keep an eye on Kadia. Night fell, and candles were lit in the estate. Alice happily combs Grace's hair, and Grace says that she needs to get ready for the party. She orders the maid to make a dress out of silk, not too bright. Eily and Baron call their mistress at the same time. Alice offers to help them with the bed for now. She gives them the task of preparing the bed and bringing food, and Alice herself will help Grace change her clothes. The new maids carry out the orders given to them. Grace finds them suspicious no matter what. Kadia walks into the room looking dejected, holding the dress in her hands. Grace is surprised by her visit. Kadia silently moves on. Kadia deliberately drops the torn dress she was carrying in her hands onto the floor. She screams accusations at Grace, making her look guilty, and falls to the floor. Grace is completely confused and doesn't understand anything. The Duke, terrified to the point of horror, comes running with a crowd of servants calling for Kadia. Kadia deliberately pretends that Grace has harmed her, and the Duke notices this, but does not understand anything. The evil Duke screams at the top of his lungs, trying to figure out what happened here. Kadia, squeezing out tears, replies that nothing happened. She makes a show of apologizing to Grace, pretending that she was against her coming to her. Kadia continues to press on everyone's pity, calling herself a commoner, adding that she guesses that Grace will not like her choice. The embittered Duke accuses her of being the one who tore Kadia's dress, while Milena tries to somehow protect and take Grace's side. A heated public discussion begins among the servants. Eily and Baron stand silently away from everyone else. She asks directly and calmly if her father thinks she did it. The girl says that if she hated or envied Kadia, she would not have suggested organizing a celebration. The Duke admits this because he knows that Grace would always confess, but would never apologize for it. He doesn't like that Grace is his daughter, but he knows her character better than anyone. But at the same time, his poor daughter and her mother suffered for a very long time, and he was not with them for 12 years. The Duke begins to compare their situations in his head and cannot decide exactly. But he makes a decision and says that it doesn't mean anything. Alina tries to say something. Grace thinks that it is harder to defend yourself and easier to blame someone. It is very childish of Kadia to use this advantage. Grace replies that it is her fault, shocking everyone. She smirks and says that she tore her dress. But the girl believes that she has not lost yet and is full of self-confidence. The Duke asks, surprised but calm, why and for what purpose his daughter did this. Grace, proudly crossing her arms, confidently replies that she didn't like the dress. Grace continues to lie and says that Kadia refused to throw away the dresses, making a sad face. At this moment, the hero of the occasion quietly and hesitantly tries to deny it. Grace claims she is doing him a favor by asking him to be kind and give in. The Duke, despite great reluctance, makes a decision and acts as his daughter does. He tells Kadia, who has fallen to the floor, that Grace can be wild at times, but he would never envy her. Kadia, with annoyance and angry disappointment, answers the Duke that she understands everything. Milena leaves with Kadia, holding her carefully by the shoulder. Alice watches the two of them go while Grace watches her. The room is almost empty. The maid asks her mistress why she took all the blame on herself, but Grace replies that she could not justify herself if she only denied everything. Alice asks if Grace is happy with everything. She tells her that she is not quite satisfied. Grace gently wipes her face with a handkerchief and a maid stands behind her. Alice happily reports that they can visit the studio at any time, and everything else went well too. Grace is delighted by this news, saying that it is all for the sake of her dear sister. Eiley and Barham clear the table after Grace's tea party. She asks them to come over when they say it's time to go. The maids, as they were ordered, approach Grace. The girls claim they don't know anything, but Grace asks if Kadia sent them. They insist that everything is wrong, and they were taught to be faithful to her lady. Grace points out that they remained silent yesterday and did not stand up for themselves. She says that they are just maids and will not go against Kadia anyway. Eiley and Barham looked at the lady in fear, not knowing what to say, but Grace immediately drove them away. She asks if they will tell everything to Kadia. Grace tells her that it will be a warning. Someone had to silence people 20 years ago, and almost no one knows what happened then. Grace admits it will be more complicated than she expected. No one would let society gossip about this. Because it concerned the Imperial family, Grace throws the document she read into the fireplace. She notices that everything is hidden too carefully, which is beyond her father's abilities. She meets Kadia and the governess, who are walking towards her, having just finished a lesson for Kadia, who did not want to cross paths with Grace once again. The governess greets her joyfully, which cannot be said about Kadia. She says that the lesson just ended, answering Grace's question. Then she asks Kadia herself how it all went. Kadia answers Grace, looking away. She is still learning, but trying very hard. The governess asks if Grace cares about her sister, to which Grace replies that of course she does, since they both have a family to run, but soon she says that it's time for her to go. Kadia is left alone with Grace, and they walk through the estate in silence. Grace starts the conversation by saying that Kadia is very diligent. She answers her. She hopes that she will not harm the family. She calls herself an heiress who, out of envy, harmed her sister, and asks if this is the brand Kadia sought for her. Grace says that Kadia went against her, that she can try to win her father's affection at any cost, but so that she doesn't get in her way. Kadia, in silent shock and horror, tries to comprehend everything she heard. She needs not only the love of her father, but also the love of those around her. That is why she will try to get rid of anyone who in any way interferes with her in achieving her goal. Grace realized this yesterday, and then figured out what to do with her rude little sister. Kadia walks away alone into the completely empty corridor. She comes across a huge portrait of Grace hanging on the wall. The girl remembers her past and how hard it was for her. Her mind races over how much Grace irritates her. The cold night dimly illuminates the Duke of Winoston's vast estate. Grace, scissors in hand, goes to carry out her plan, which she had thought out during the day. She walks into the room with Kadia's dresses. The morning at the Duke of Winoston's estate begins with the most terrible scream. Kadia's ruined, recently woven dress lies on the floor with horrible slits. The two maids were completely bewildered and confused as to how this could have happened. One of them decides to ask the head maid Meryl what they should do now. The woman is sure that it was Grace who did it. The Duke, Milena, and Kadia enter the room, and the man menacingly asks what is going on here. Milena is speechless in complete shock, while Kadia is overcome by a terrible tremor throughout her body. The Duke, in terrible rage, orders Grace to be called here immediately. Kadia falls to her already ruined dresses. She didn't even know that Grace would do such a thing. and she didn't expect it from her. Grace comes to the family, asking them what happened. The Duke told her what had happened with arrogant self-confidence. Kadia glares at Grace with ferocious fury. The Duke accuses her of being the one who ruined Kadia's dresses, that he knows for sure that Grace is offended by Kadia because of her actions. The daughter answers him that she does not hold a grudge against her little sister at all. The Duke begins to explain that 2 days ago Kadia, but cannot continue. Grace reminds that she still took the blame on herself, but she kept quiet about the fact that Kadia had set her up. She continues by asking why she would do this if she knew that she would be the one immediately blamed. He asks her directly whether Kadia tried to defame her name 2 days ago. Grace stands proudly next to Kadia, who is sitting next to her dresses, asking what she thinks about it. She starts saying that she gave her a library, wanted to throw a party, and find a new dress since something happened to the one, having already asked the studio to accept them, and they have the best outfits in the capital. The girl asks her again if she thinks it was Grace who tore the dresses. Milena says in surprise that even she can't get an appointment at Froze's studio, to which Grace replies that she knows the owner. Atelier Froze is very popular. Even among the nobility, bookings are made a year in advance. But they make an exception for Grace because she inspires their employees, and people who don't know the truth can only believe her words. Alice confirms Grace's words about their agreement with the studio. She asks again if Kadia heard Alice, and if she thinks it is her fault that the dresses are ruined. Kadia looks at her dejectedly, not answering the question asked. She gathers her strength and says with a smile that Grace did nothing, which makes Grace smile. She tells the Duke that an unknown person has entered her daughter's room, and this is a serious matter. Grace asks her father's permission to find the culprit who ruined Kadia's dresses. The Duke agrees to let Grace find the culprit responsible for the incident. She waits for the Duke to leave while Kadia looks at her back. Grace calls her father a fool for wanting a criminal to look for a criminal, saying it's funny, which shocks Kadia again. She guesses that it was Grace, and Grace says that she hopes that Kadia is not so stupid as to believe that another person is involved besides herself. All the maids looked at Grace with animosity. She asks Kadia on purpose if she thought that she would blame her and be able to live in peace. Kadia tells her that she didn't even know what this dress meant to her, clutching her dress in her fist. It was the first gift she received at the estate, and she recalls how delighted she was when she first saw it. Kadia remembers the joy she felt as soon as she received the dress. Kadia's soul is torn into 2 parts by the bitterness of losing something so important to her. She calls Grace petty, to which the girl replies that she deserved it. Placing her hands on Kadia's shoulders, she asks her to be accused of a more serious offense next time. Kadia doesn't understand what Grace is talking about, and when she asks, she suggests blaming herself for the attempted poisoning. After all, that's when Grace could start poisoning Kadia's food, talking about it in such a way that it would be impossible to understand whether it was serious or not. She promises that she will fulfill all of Kadia's wishes. Grace shares the news that an unknown person ruined Kadia's dresses yesterday. She suggests that this man works in the estate, and all the servants immediately start to get into a commotion. The girl adds the detail that the criminal tried to blame her for his crime. Grace demonstratively raises a cup of hot tea and says that she is actively looking for the culprit, and that as soon as he is found. She breaks the cup in her hands. The shards fly in all directions and the tea spills, burning her hand. Grace promises that as soon as she finds the culprit, she will whip him in the square so that everyone can see it. The maid informs that the dresses ordered several days ago are ready for trying on. Grace asks to bring her clothes and tell her that she will come in person. Alice asks her mistress excitedly if she plans to accuse the servant of the crime, to which Grace replies that she did not. The girl is sure that her father understood that she was to blame, but he did not say anything, only because Kadia refused to blame her. She asks Alice to tell the information to the maids, which surprises her. Grace explains to her that a rumor has spread that she has allegedly found the culprit, but does not want to disclose his name so as not to defame the family's name. Grace jokingly asks Alice if she intends to argue with her, but the maid replies that she does not at all, and that she will tell everyone. Bright rays of sunlight fell through the beautiful windows of Froze's studio. Valeria, calling Grace ruthless, asks how it was possible to tear all of Kadia's dresses. Grace tells her that she always knew about her cruelty. Valeria asks if Grace's sister has said anything, to which Grace replies that she hasn't heard a word from her in days, suggesting that she is already thinking up a new evil plan. She counters by suggesting that she could have refused to fight, but Grace doesn't believe that she could have refused to fight over such a small thing. The girl argues that Grace destroyed the dress that was most precious to her, and it was her first gift from her father. Grace says she has known her father for 20 years, but she has never received a gift from him. Therefore, she does not have such a stupid attachment to things, but in her face you can see bitterness with a little envy. Valeria replies that it's all very complicated. A girl enters the room and calls Grace, thanking her for waiting. She stands up and speaks from the table where she was drinking tea with Valeria, saying that it is time for her to go. Grace is delighted that any minute now she will see the best silk dress that will come into fashion very soon. Valeria continues to drink tea, already being alone. Grace thanks the girl for waiting, walking towards her in a new dress. The girl looked charming in a new dress, made especially for her. Valeria can't believe her eyes, saying that she was very impressed by the dress, and it itself is charming. Grace also likes the style of the dress, and asks to stick to the same style. She asks if she can get everyone's attention, reluctantly, but Valeria agrees to it, asking that Grace not stand next to her at the party. Grace asks with a smile if she looks that beautiful in this dress, but Valeria replies that it is far from that. The girls leave the studio while the sun outside says goodbye with its last rays of spring. Valeria asks her friend if she will really buy her this dress. Grace replies that she must. She is surprised and says that she will go home. Grace asks again if they were going to eat together. Valeria replies that they are not close enough to have lunch together. Grace watches her friend walk away. She calls Valeria a naughty girl but continues to smile. Grace walks through the streets of the Empire wearing a cloak with a high hood. Here, she suddenly notices a suspicious guy among the crowd of ordinary townspeople. It turns out to be Riku. Grace doesn't understand what he's doing here. The girl assumes that her friend is heading to the alley. She hides behind the house when Riku turns around abruptly. Grace decides not to poke her nose into other people's business, dismissing all assumptions about why Rick needed to go into that alley. The girl decides that it is better to leave, and she will ask at their next meeting. Suddenly, a guy appears behind her, grabbing her so that she cannot escape. Grace does not understand how he managed to get there. He asks who sent her, but she recognizes the voice, which seemed familiar to her. It was Riku, which surprised Grace even more. The girl tore herself away from his arms, and he recognized her too. Grace shouted in irritation at what Riku was doing. He calmly asks her what she is doing here. The girl replies that he should also explain himself, because this road leads to a brothel. He begins to deny Grace's assumptions, saying that it's completely beside the point. Grace doesn't trust him, but Riku swears on his life that he would never do anything like that. Grace believes Rick, for which he thanks her. She asks the guy again what he is doing here, to which he starts to say. The girl interrupts the magician and asks directly if she should figure out why people with scarlet hair are disappearing. He confirms this, plaintively saying that the princess seems to be in despair since she asked him for help. But Riku can't refuse to help her because most likely magicians are involved. The guy spent days studying all the cases but found nothing. The man in the office asks if the first victim was close to Master Zack. Riku confirms this, but says he didn't learn anything special about him, but this man was acquainted with all 4 victims. Riku says that the suspect's workday is ending soon and he should hurry. The man asks if Riku will go alone, worrying about the young boy. He reminds Rick that the princess asked him to work on this matter with Lady Grace. Riku remembers telling him that Grace was nothing but trouble, and that it was better for the man to forget about her. Standing in front of Grace, he decided to keep quiet about it and said that he was there on business. The girl asks if it's about missing people, saying that she will help him. The guy says he doesn't need her help and asks why she was following him. Grace explains to him that she was just walking around the city, and when she noticed him, she decided to check the guy out, because those who serve the princess should not visit such places. Riku says that he is not interested in such things, and Grace can calmly leave or investigate on her own, because she will only get in his way. The girl admits that she could very well become a hindrance to him, but she considers him to be a weakling. Still, she decides to call out to him and tell him that the world is quite harsh, so he should be careful. Grace still asks him to let her know if he needs help from her, to which he says he won't. Grace leaves silently, while Riku silently says that he will never understand her. But he won't need to. The Duke demands perfection in everything, announcing that Princess Evelina will be at the celebration. Grace finds it funny to watch all this, and she is not very interested in it. Alice calls her mistress, to which she immediately pays attention to her, no longer paying attention to what is happening with her father. The maid says that an important guest from the Froze studio has arrived at their estate. Grace says that she will be here very soon and asks her to call Kadia. Kadia, completely delighted and not knowing what to say, simply looked at the collection of dresses that Grace had bought for her. Grace suggested choosing any dress. The choice was huge, and Kadia most likely would not have had time to try on all the dresses even in the whole day. Kadia awkwardly asks her sister what all this is. She explains to her that she decided to pay for that mistake and has prepared a small compensation. Kadia doesn't believe her words that this is just a small compensation, and understands perfectly well how difficult it was to organize. Grace says that Kadia can buy everything if she wants, or she will put them in storage if she doesn't like anything. Kadia asks about the warehouse in surprise. Grace confirms that she can simply take them there and leave them until the right moment when Kadia feels like tearing up the dresses, which is exactly what she likes. Kadia was very hurt by these words. but she refrained from being rude to Grace in response. She starts to say that she would never, but Grace abruptly interrupts her with an offer to try on a dress that she had already taken off the hanger. The girl took a luxurious yellow dress with green elements. Grace asks Kadia's opinion on the dress she picked for her. She hands her sister a dress, asking her to try it on. Kadia looked at him with a storm of mixed emotions, her arms crossed over her chest. The beautiful yellow dress seemed to shine like the sun in the most long-awaited dawn after a terrible night, the end of which was expected with every passing minute. Kadia is tormented by a moral choice, and she believes that if she agrees now, her father will think that she only cares about wealth, and that she was only pretending that day. Grace had predicted what Kadia would think about this, and had deliberately put her in front of such a difficult choice that would hurt her in any outcome. Kadia looks at Grace dryly, her face completely devoid of any joy. Grace thinks that Kadia wanted to pretend to be a sweet daughter who just lacks her father's love, while simultaneously portraying a modest girl who doesn't expect anything from her parents. Grace wants to show Kadia that it is better for her to be a good sister than to be an obedient daughter. Kadia replies that everything is fine and there is no need to worry. Grace is starting to think they have a problem with this dress. She suggests to her sister to invite other people from another studio if Kadia didn't like these dresses. But the Kadia replies that she simply cannot accept such an expensive gift. Some of the maids are actually very proud of Kadia. They, on the contrary, believe that Grace's days of vanity and arrogance will soon come to an end. Grace says that she is not asking her to pay for them, but she will pay for everything for Kadia herself. She clarifies that she will not spend the family money, but will pay for the dress for Kadia out of her own pocket. Grace runs a lot of different businesses, so she has a lot of income, although she doesn't have as much money as her family, but she has enough money for a dress. The girl says that buying an outfit is the least she can do for her, and finally, she has a charming little sister herself. Kadia looks away in embarrassment and says that Grace shouldn't spend so much money on her. Grace insists on her own and says that she really wants to buy her a dress and it won't be a problem for her. She tells her that she always pays her bills, so she begs her to accept her gift, calling Kadia her dear sister. The girl asks if she will refuse her sister, adjusting her hair. Kadia remains awkwardly silent, still not daring to answer Grace's latest request. She puts on this charming dress, which shone with its beauty and made it clear that it was sewn in the Froze studio especially for her. Kadia is angry, which does not surprise her sister at all, but only confirms her opinion of her that she can only tear dresses, although she is already 20. Grace admires and says that Kadia is simply glowing, again calling her dear sister, to which she replies that she herself is hardly as beautiful as she is. Grace replies haughtily and smugly that this is obvious. This upsets Kadia greatly, because she certainly did not expect such an angry response to her compliment. She keeps repeating that she cannot accept such an expensive gift from her sister. Grace orders her to take it, otherwise she will be very angry if she refuses. She puts an incredibly beautiful flower in Kadia's hair. Grace says she was sure he would have been right for Kadia, adding that good girls should accept gifts. Kadia moves away from her with obvious displeasure. Grace asks if her sister wants more gifts. She replies that this dress is more than enough, and she is tired and her head hurts badly. Kadia thanks Grace for today and asks if she can go back to her room to rest. Grace replies that Kadia can, of course, go to her place. She speaks of Kadia's fatigue, which has begun to worry that Kadia is in poor health. Grace tells her that her sister will try on the rest of the dresses later, and she will now pay for all the dresses that the Froze studio brought. The maids are shocked by Grace's expensive purchase and can't even believe what they hear. She tells Kadia to go to her room and rest. The dresses are all hers now, and she can try them on later. Kadia walks down the stairs, heading towards her room. The maids call out to her and ask if she will accept all the dresses from Grace, but she replies that she plans to return them to her mother, since her sister spent too much on them. She can't understand why Grace keeps doing this. Here, the girl unexpectedly meets Lady Valeria, who is waiting for her at the stairs. She invites her to tea, asking if she has any free time now. Lady Valeria says that they don't invite just anyone, and Grace asked to save a place for Kadia, and she couldn't refuse her. Kadia tells her that she feels unwell, thinking that she can't even imagine what Grace has planned. She looks depressed, and Lady Valeria asks if it is because of her that Kadia is not feeling well. Lady Valeria, with her hands folded across her chest, in tears asks if Kadia hates her. The girl apologizes for showing up uninvited, calling this act very rude and she shouldn't have done it. She says that's not what she meant at all. Lady Valeria explains that she heard about Kadia's interest in high society and she wanted to help her with it, but she is very sorry. Kadia shouts at the top of her voice that she agrees to come to the tea party. Lady Valeria is very happy and thanks Kadia, smiling at her. It seems to her that she has fallen into a trap because of how quickly Lady Valeria's face has changed. Lady Valeria leads Katia to the carriage with a satisfied smirk, looking to the side as if giving a sign to the one who planned everything with her. Grace looks at the carriage while sipping her wine, saying that everything is going according to plan. Alice pours wine into a glass for Mrs. Grace. The maid decides to ask her why she's so kind to Lady Katia. Grace answers her question with a question about whether she knows what the scariest feeling is. She replies that it is the feeling when you realize that you have met an opponent that is too formidable and you cannot fight him. And that is why she shows her all the beauty of the world and gives her expensive clothes, so that she understands that she can never compare to her. All of this will give Katia an inferiority complex that will drive her to complete despair. Alice decides to share that she was worried that Lady Katia might harm Grace using the Duke's support. Grace looks at Alice with complete bewilderment. But now the maid clearly understands that she has no reason to worry about Grace at all, which she shares with great joy. Grace asks her to repeat, playfully squeezing both cheeks, and the girl herself became cheerful from Alice's words. Katia ignored all the conversations, not even listening to what was being said. She's stuffing her face with cookies until a girl in a black dress sitting nearby pays attention to her. A stranger asks her if she likes these cookies. Katia is surprised and does not know who it is. The mysterious girl introduces herself as Magnet Yaren. Yaren begins to tell that she studied at the same military academy with Grace, and she was in one of the best groups. The girl shares that Grace helped her a lot at the academy, so they were very close, and it was an honor for her to meet her sister. Katia says that she is flattered to meet Lady Magnet, but she does not understand what is going on here, but she does not voice it. Lady Magnet says that she should have greeted Katia personally, but was afraid that she would disturb her, since everyone could only wait for an invitation. But Katia decided to join herself. Katia is completely confused, but understands what this strange feeling is that all of this is causing her. Lady Magnet calls it a great honor. Everyone dreamed of Grace's attention as a child, and they are all grateful that she allowed them to become acquaintances. Katia agrees with her cordially, smiling back. But she realizes that absolutely everything that is around her now belongs to her sister, and Katia herself calls her a terrible woman in her thoughts, realizing that Grace never needed her father's love. Katia is incredibly irritated by all this, and she decides to work harder to tarnish Grace's honor and completely destroy her reputation. The girl plans to talk to Meryl about this, to ask her advice on how to embarrass Grace at the party. Lady Valeria glances at Katia with indifference and a certain boredom. The evening sunset has already colored the vast Winoston estate. The day is drawing to a close. Katia bows and says that it was an honor to attend Lady Valeria's tea party. She says that it's time for her to go and gets ready to leave. Lady Valeria says she wants to talk to Katia. Katia stops and asks again what the girl wanted to tell her. Lady Valeria asks Katia to try not to quarrel with Grace because she is not her equal. Katia replies that there was a misunderstanding, and she values her sister very much. Lady Valeria begins to tell a story about a girl who wanted to harm Grace, and she, in turn, used her, with the gift of controlling people like chess pieces. Katia did not respond to these words. Katia silently entered the estate, avoiding the answer, and Lady Valeria said that it was no longer important. Lady Valeria is absolutely sure that she will understand everything herself when she experiences it herself. Katia didn't understand what she meant, and stood at the door of the estate with an exhausted look. Grace approaches Katia, asking if she had fun. She says that thanks to her, she met many people who were very kind, and she herself realized how much she still had to learn. Grace is surprised by these revelations of her sister, and Katia, in turn, promises to make every effort during her studies. Grace says that you don't need to learn everything, you just need to know how to manage them, and then all their knowledge will become her knowledge. She tells her sister to remember her words and rest in her room, while Katia herself looks very depressed. Katia says that she will, of course, remember her words. Meryl runs to Katia in a hurry. She asks if everything is okay with Katia, to which Katia begins to speak uncertainly. The head maid seemed to have a premonition that all was not well with Katia. Katia begins to cry and admits that she felt terribly humiliated. The maid tries her best to calm Katia's hysteria, who begins to cry. A shocked Meryl can't believe what Katia told her. Katia says she was very embarrassed, and Grace was cruel and openly bragging about everything she had. She asks Meryl if she can pay Grace back for her horrible actions at the upcoming party. Katia asks the maid to make sure Grace never hurts her again. Meryl asks Katia not to cry, wiping the tears from her red cheeks. She promises that Katia can rely on her, and that she wanted to teach her a lesson since she was rude to her. Katia thanks Meryl for her help, wiping away her tears again. Meryl couldn't even imagine how Grace could hurt Katia, but she became confident that she took after her mother. Katia enthusiastically calls Meryl the best, but it was hard to discern any emotion on the maid's face. Grace had been eavesdropping on them the whole time, standing behind the wall. She signs a document with a gold pen in her office. The girl continues her routine by practicing her sword skills on a dummy. The maids discuss Grace. One of them says that sometimes she thinks about her mistress, that she is not human because she constantly checks papers in the office and is distracted only by training and meals. Another maid adds that Grace has beautiful skin, so beautiful that she could not achieve it even if she spent a lot of money on care. All the servants are in terrible confusion, preparing for the holiday. A luxurious table has been prepared for many guests and a great celebration. Grace criticizes the training of the servants and maids, saying that it looks more like a commoner's market than a duke's estate. She, adjusting the high collar of her shirt, calls Aliona to her. The maid arrives immediately with a smile as charming as a sunny day. Grace asks to prepare a bath for her, untying her beautiful blonde curls. Meryl looks depressed, and Grace gives her a sharp look, wanting to know if she's planning to set her up somehow. But she simply smiles at the maid, noticing how she simply goes about her job duties. The girls simply walk past each other, Meryl looking at the floor while Grace walks with her head held high. Grace decides to remind Meryl that she only has 3 chances. The maid asks her again what she is talking about. Grace goes on to say that Meryl has already made 2 mistakes by putting her in a difficult position. She wishes her luck with a smile. Grace leaves with Alina, leaving the head maid to think. The night came, shining with a sea of beautiful stars, and the moon illuminating the beautiful estate in celebration. An elegant carriage pulled by 4 horses quickly arrived at the estate. Riku, sitting with his legs crossed, asks with displeasure why he also needs to go to this celebration. A man from his work explains the reason, familiar to Rick himself, that Viscount Dvincer, the fiancé of the crown princess, was injured by a horse. Riku grumbles that the princess should have sent the knights then, asking why she sent him of all people. The man answers him that he knows the answer to this question too because the princess wanted to send a magician there. Riku just scratches the back of his head in response to the man's words, with the same displeased face. The man says that when the princess can't come, she sends the best magician from the palace to show the significance of the holiday. Riku says that Grace would like to see the princess. Riku thinks to himself that his thoughts of a quiet life will not come true as long as the bright moonlight shines through the window. The man tells him to behave decently when he leaves the carriage and pretend to be a commoner, that he is the magician Riku and not a duke. Riku, with a hint of arrogance, says that he already knows everything. The man says the duke doesn't seem to understand that if he doesn't pretend, things will only get more difficult. The duke exhales in relief, looking away. He gets up and says that it really irritates him. The duke, in the guise of Riku, promises that he will become a commoner for today. Young ladies standing on the street discuss the guest who has arrived, starting an argument about who it is. The disgruntled mage approaches the main doors of the estate. The servant asks the guest to provide his invitation card. Riku takes out his invitation to the celebration from his inside pocket. The servant is very surprised when he looks at the unusual letter. He asks the guy who turned out to be a guest from her house about the princess, to which he replies that the princess was unable to come in person, and so she sent him to the party as a sign of respect. The servant kindly lets the guest into the estate. Riku asks him to see Lady Grace to give her some information in person. The servant offers to take him upstairs to Grace's room. Riku continues to talk to the servant while his partner exhales heavily. He confidently says to himself that Riku does not even remotely resemble a commoner. The servant opens the large door to Grace's room, letting Rika go first. The young man is in great shock from the picture he sees. Grace is dressed in a charming pink dress, and her beautiful blonde hair is complemented by cute gold jewelry. The girl asks in surprise why they are standing in the middle of the aisle, while Riku's assistant is completely red in embarrassment. Riku walks up to her, saying that she sent him to the party. Grace inquires about the princess's condition, asking if she is okay. The guy's face changes, and in his thoughts he is thinking about how he knew her tone would change right now. Riku begins to tell that Viscount Vincent fell from his horse, so her highness is with him. Grace asks if Richard is hurt. The guy also asks if Grace knows the Viscount. She replies that he was the best rider in her military academy. Skepticism, mixed with concern for her old friend, immediately appears on her face. Riku begins to think that she is upset because the princess couldn't come. He snaps his finger and a gift box appears in the air containing a beautiful necklace, emerald in color like Kadia's eyes. The guy explains that it is a gift for her sister when Grace asks what it is. Grace is surprised because she sees in front of her a necklace that once belonged to the former empress, and the necklace itself can be considered the treasure of the empire. Riku quotes the princess's words to her. This is the least she can give to the younger sister of her respected and precious knight, and Grace smiles happily at these words. He asks if he can go now since the work the princess gave him is done. Grace doesn't let him go because the princess asked him to give the necklace to Kadia personally, and Riku is simply trying to disobey her highness's order. She orders him to personally give the necklace to Kadia and to be with her until the beginning of the celebration. He objects and asks why he needs to be around until the very beginning of the party. The girl explains that she doesn't care if he's caught for insulting the imperial family, but his actions will harm the princess's reputation. Grace says that he can do whatever he wants, but he should behave decently until he gives the gift to Kadia. The guy obediently agrees, grabbing his neck with his hand. Grace hands the former empress's necklace over to Rick and asks her to introduce him. He tells her that if she doesn't want any trouble that might happen because of him, then wouldn't it be better to let him go? But the girl decides to ask if such a capable magician has any ambitions. The girl, when asked why he needs ambition, answers that people become complacent when they stop trying, and complacency leads to a fall. And this applies to her too. Riku thinks that she sounds too desperate for someone who is praised by everyone without exception. Grace invites him to go with her. They go to the celebration together no matter how much they don't want to. The celebration begins actively, servants carry trays, guests gather in groups. Grace and Riku walk together in full view of everyone while everyone watches them. She greets guests by placing her hand on her chest. The guests greet her back, she smiles warmly, Riku keeps a serious look. Grace thanks everyone for coming to the party in honor of her only sister Kadia's birthday. She hopes everyone enjoys the evening. She introduces Riku as the magician who has graced them with his presence, on behalf of Her Highness the Princess. The girl, hearing all the numerous discussions about the guy's lack of a last name and where the princess got it from, says that she will introduce him again when the hero of the occasion herself arrives. Lady Valeria beckons to Grace as she approaches her. The girl greets her with joyful surprise. Valeria compliments Grace on how irresistible she is today, that she didn't even expect her friend to choose a silk dress. She asks her sarcastically if she doesn't like it. Valeria repeats that Grace knows about her admiration for each of her outfits, and confesses about the upcoming purchase of silk clothes, which will happen tomorrow. Grace hopes that her friend will cope with the work, thinking that very soon their common business will go uphill. Valeria tells her friend that she wanted to tell her the same thing. She looks at Rika in surprise. The girl greets him, saying that it is an honor for her to meet the princess's magician. He expresses his gratitude and says that he is very flattered by this. Grace looks at Rika with disbelief but says nothing. She just sneezes. Valeria pays attention to it but does not say that she is healthy. Valeria is surprised by Grace's silence. She finds it strange because, in her opinion, she would have said something by now. She directly asks her friend in her ear if she knows this silent guy Grace. She replies that she has only seen him a couple of times and does not know him. But the girl notes to herself that they have a strange relationship for people who have only seen each other a couple of times. Valeria says with a sly grin that she completely forgot about her brother's visit to the party. Grace is definitely not happy about this, and Valeria's brother is just an unwanted guest at the party for her, but she simply decides to remain silent. A smiling man greets Grace cheerfully, saying that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The girl only dryly confirms this without much desire to continue the dialogue. Now Riku also fully understood why Grace sighed so heavily. The reason was crystal clear to him. Compared to the childishly carefree and smiling brother of Lady Valeria, Grace looked very menacing and cold, as if just one look from her made you feel anxious. The man asks how Grace is doing, saying that he was going to visit her earlier, but unfortunately, he missed the opportunity. Grace only answers dryly and directly that she shouldn't have forced herself to come. Riku wonders if Lady Valeria's brother realizes that he is interested in her. At that moment, Valeria's brother shifts his gaze from Grace to the guy standing next to her. He asks Grace who is next to her. The girl replies that it is a magician sent to the holiday by the princess herself, due to unforeseen circumstances. The man immediately says that he is glad to meet the young man. Riku notes to himself that there are a lot of different weirdos here. He decides to stay away from the capital once this is all over. Grace says goodbye to Valeria, who is not thrilled with the sight of her brother and says goodbye hesitantly. The guests greet Grace with delighted faces. Some are already sipping wine. The girl says that she is pleased to see them all, smiling back at the guests. Riku pulls away from Grace while she is chatting with the guests and walks away from her. The guy breathes a sigh of relief, confident that he was able to escape. The Duke and Milena arrive at the celebration, accompanied by a loud announcement of their arrival. Riku tries to remember that Kadia is Grace's half-sister, which is why they have different mothers. The Duke says that he is very happy to see everyone. As the guests know, Kadia is his lost daughter, whom he managed to find after 20 long years, and today they are celebrating her birthday. Kadia comes out in a luxurious white dress with puffy sleeves when her father asks to greet the girl, in whose honor this solemn celebration was held. The girl tells the guests that she is very grateful to everyone who came for their presents. It is a great honor for her. She looks at Grace with terrible malice and thought that couldn't she at least not dress up like that on this day. Lady Valeria is having a wonderful time with Grace, and they look radiant with happiness at their time together. One girl from the crowd of guests says that they look wonderful when compared. She is immediately shut up by a man from the crowd, who warns that someone might hear it. Grace and Riku exchange glances. She notices that the guy has walked quite far away from them. She orders him to come to her with a furious look. Riku complains in his thoughts that the girl doesn't give him any rest at all. Kadia approaches the couple and calls out to Grace. The girl looks at the young man in amazement, enchanted by his beauty. But in her thoughts there is only anger, because this handsome, unfamiliar guy is standing next to Grace. Grace introduces her sister to the guy who turns out to be the princess's magician sent to the celebration on her orders. The princess had a lot to do, and one particularly urgent matter, because of which she was unable to come in person, which Grace explains. Riku demonstrates his magical abilities to everyone, and a gift box with a necklace for Kadia appears out of thin air. He holds it out in his hands, declaring that this is the very necklace that belonged to the former empress. All the guests were in great shock from such a gift, and from his appearance, everyone immediately turned their attention to the magician. Kadia is in great shock from such a special gift. Her hands tremble, but they reach for the luxurious necklace with green gemstones, and she herself admits that this is a great honor for her. The Duke acknowledges with dignity that this is a very precious gift, and is already preparing to speak of his intentions, and promises that he will personally thank the princess. Riku good-naturedly replies that he is not obligated to do so at all. The Duke indignantly asks Riku the reasons for this answer. The magician explains that for the princess, this gift is nothing compared to what Grace does for her family. The Duke accepts this answer, even though it is what he did not want to hear. The guests admit among themselves that Grace has been serving the princess for many years. Grace herself at this time does not run to boast of her merits, but stands proudly in silence. The Duke rubs his forehead, surprised that everything turned out as he had never imagined. Riku asks Grace for permission to leave after she forced him to personally give the gift to Kadia. The girl nods approvingly to the young man, letting him go. She turns her head to the side and looks at him walking away from the family to whom he had just given a very significant gift. The celebration is in full swing. In the center of the huge hall, there is a beautiful large fountain demonstrating the wealth of the estate and its owners. Grace is called out to by someone from the crowd, which surprises her greatly. It turns out to be Lady Valeria, who immediately wants to know about Grace's secret visits to the princess. Lady Valeria recognizes her friend's cunning upon learning of her plans, but she immediately wonders why the princess didn't come herself. Because from her lips, this statement would sound more weighty. Grace says that the princess was unable to come because of Richard's injury. But after Grace's answer, she does not believe that Viscount de Vincent could fall from a horse, because the only good thing about him is his character and ability to ride. Grace is outraged by the rudeness in her friend's statements, but she can't help but agree that something is definitely wrong. She suggests that some criminal is to blame for this, and he didn't need Richard to be at this party. Grace is absolutely sure that the criminal knows how much the princess loves her chosen one, and therefore will be by his side. Lady Valeria ironically asks that he could not fall off his horse because he misses his beloved so much. And Grace, in contrast, answers her friend that Richard is not like that. Lady Valeria agrees with her friend. She looks at the guests, suspicious of some of them. Grace points this out, waiting for her friend to explain. Lady Valeria shows no particular desire to talk about what is going through her head. She decides to say that she suspects the Manhwa house of all this. Grace is stunned and cannot believe her friend's abrupt assumption. Lady Valeria merely gravely confirms what she quite confidently suspects them of. She suspects the eldest daughter and heir, Ionel Manhwa. Grace recalls that she studied with her at the same military academy, and there are many similarities between them. The girl immediately becomes very wary of the memories of the heiress of the family of their enemies. She could easily take the life of a person who would stand in her way or get on her nerves, and would not even think twice. But she killed a commoner with whom she once spent the night for no reason. Grace feels uneasy at these memories. Lady Valeria tries to reassure her that she was only expressing her assumption. Grace wonders why Riku always stays farthest away from everyone, and when there are many people around, he stands alone from someone. Lady Valeria is already saying goodbye to Grace, saying that it is time for her to go, since she promised to chat with the other ladies. Grace looks at Rick standing alone on the top floor. She decides to call out to the guy, and he turns his attention to her in surprise. The girl wonders why Riku doesn't join the celebration, since he gave the gift to Kadia and now he can celebrate. Riku asks if he should spend time at the banquet, and Grace replies that he can lift his spirits and improve his relationships with others. She suggests getting a bite to eat, to which Riku asks the same question, and in his thoughts she says that he doesn't want to behave like this. Riku would really like to leave, but Grace won't leave him alone. But the girl still doesn't leave him alone. Grace does admit, however, that she recognizes Rick's way of living as good too. But she reminds him to behave appropriately because it was he who was chosen by the princess to give the gift to Kadia. Riku changes his mind about the girl because he thought that she would impose her opinion on him. He smirks, and in his mind it sounds like Grace is intrigued by this action. Grace asks again if these are really the princess's words, in which he said on her behalf that the necklace is nothing compared to her devotion to the princess. Riku replies that this is exactly what the princess asked him to convey. Grace begins to beam with happiness, unable to believe what she is hearing. The Duke suddenly appears with a reproach, so that this does not allow Grace to turn her head. Rick feels uneasy just by looking at the Duke of Winoston. He notices to himself that Grace does not receive the same love as Kadia, who receives all the love while Grace is looked upon with terrible contempt. The guy in his thoughts suggests that no one in the family loves Grace, and that is why she is so obsessed with the princess. Grace asks her furious father where she lets herself get carried away. The Duke says he is well aware that she is tormented by the fear that Kadia will be the heir, but he does not consider this a problem, and Grace should not harm Kadia over such nonsense. Grace asks her father again that she doesn't remember when she wounded Kadia. The Duke says the princess may have forgotten what Grace did for her birthday, but he definitely remembers it and calls his daughter's character vile. Grace says with sadness that her father never asked her why she did what she did. The Duke tells her that he does not need any excuses from Grace, and he will completely refuse any mercy if she ruins Kadia's holiday. Grace quips that she didn't know her father cared so much about his daughter's birthdays that he would personally come to warn Grace not to ruin the occasion. The Duke, in a fiery rage, irritably orders Grace to remember her life in comfortable conditions and how Kadia suffered away from her home. Grace only responds mockingly by saying that living in an estate with such a father is even more difficult than being homeless. Riku tries not to show his emotions, but he smiles, thinking about Grace's character, who, out of wickedness, made a lot of enemies, but those same traits help her defeat them. The Duke shouts that she grew up as the sole heir and enjoyed alone everything that she should have shared with Kadia. Grace tells him that she didn't enjoy life at all, but only received scars from her father. The Duke denies ever laying a hand on his daughter, to which she replies on her 6th birthday. She tells how he pushed her when the girl met him, and later, from this push, she fell on the stones, receiving terrible scars, which forced her to give up short dresses for the rest of her childhood. The other children thought her wounds were disgusting and repulsive. The Duke defends himself by saying that he scolded the rude people for all these words. Grace says he forced them to apologize by threatening their parents that no one would go against the Duke. Riku can't figure out if Grace really doesn't care, or if she's just pretending again like always. The Duke asks if this is why she is ruining Kadia's holiday, to which Grace replies that it all depends on Kadia's behavior. He says that Grace has a terrible character, and then immediately uses Kadia as an example, to which Grace only smiles ironically and says that if only that were true. The Duke leaves silently, only quickly exchanging glances with Riku. Riku asks Grace if she really has those childhood scars on her legs. The girl confirms that they are on her legs. Grace says she has bigger scars from military academy, and she only said the ones on her legs as a child to make her father feel sorry for her, although she doubts he has any. Riku thinks that Grace has everything except what is truly important, and in this way she is like the hero of a second-rate novel. Kadia walks excitedly down the corridor, looking around. She stops and looks at the mountain of gifts that were just waiting for her to open them. The girl remembers how she celebrated her birthdays only with her mother. But although she wanted to attend such a celebration, she did not even suspect how exhausting it was. The Duke greets Kadia joyfully, asking if she is enjoying the banquet in honor of her holiday. The girl feels all the looks that have fallen on her, but she can't do anything and say what she really feels. She is perfectly aware that she is not enjoying all this celebration, on the contrary, but she does not dare to say it. Kadia meets Grace in Riku's gaze. She immediately thanks the Duke, affectionately calling him Papa. And then Grace immediately receives gratitude and is not at all surprised by such abrupt kindness from her sister. When asked what her sister thanks her for, Kadia tells Grace that she is very grateful to her for this holiday. But Kadia takes credit for the princess's gift to Grace, saying that if she had not arranged the celebration, the princess would not have given such a wonderful gift. Grace replies that the princess simply wanted to congratulate the birthday girl. Kadia says this is the first time she has celebrated like this with so many people around. All the guests began to feel sorry for Kadia, and Riku noticed it right away. He understands that Kadia deliberately lowers herself in order to gain pity and care from others. Riku believes that Kadia and Grace are complete antipodes and opposites of each other, and Grace is already sure of this as well. He says in his mind that this family is very strange and wonderful. The maid Meryl serves the young man a tray with a large strawberry cake. Grace begins to suspect her, with the certainty that the head maid is up to something bad. Kadia offers her sister a piece of cake, which clearly irritates Grace. Grace talks about her dislike of cake, to which Kadia again appeals to pity. saying that she didn't know about it but just wanted her to enjoy it too. She asks her sister if she baked these cakes herself. Kadia confesses that she baked only one cake herself, which she plans to share with her family. All the guests are again touched by Kadia's words, specially feigned to impress them. And Grace asks her again if she really wants her to try the cake. Grace, unable to be completely sure of the harmlessness of this piece of cake, asks her if she is absolutely sure, while Kadia is on cloud 9 and replies that she is full of confidence. Kadia is very happy and excited by Grace's agreement to let her sister try her cake. Grace takes in the appearance of the cake and asks for a piece, kindly extending her hand. She tries a piece of cake. Kadia happily looks at her sister, who is enjoying the cake she made, while Madame Mariel, sternly as always, looks towards Grace. Grace, in the most horrified and incredible fear, covers her mouth with her hand as quickly as she can. Lady Valeria is no less stunned by this, and in fear calls her old friend. Riku is thrown off track, and this has all taken him by surprise. Grace can't stand on her feet and falls helplessly to the floor, trying to lean on the floor with her hands for support. She sees Madame Mariel, who has become Kadia's assistant, and her sister herself gloating, covering their grins with their hands. Everyone gathered around Grace, who kept coughing. Her personal maid Alice immediately runs to her mistress, worried about her. There was a suggestion among the guests that the cake was poisoned, and others told them that they were crazy to think of such betrayal on the part of Kadia, who had prepared the cake herself. Kadia exchanges worried glances with Madame Marl, who is confident that Grace will be fine and that the jello mixed into her piece of cake will not kill her. The head maid thinks that Grace won't die from such a small dose, but she will ruin everyone's holiday. Kadia deliberately plays dumb in front of the Duke by asking about Grace not liking her cake. She begins to doubt that everything is okay with the cake. The Duke tries to calm her down by telling her that they themselves ate the same cake that she prepared for them. Grace begins to cough up blood, unable to even stand, smearing her luxurious dress. Lady Valeria runs up to her old friend and is very worried about her. Kadia's eyes immediately filled with unchildish fear, because she certainly didn't expect her sister to start coughing up blood. Lady Valeria asks if Grace is okay, giving her support to at least sit up. Meanwhile, she remembers how Grace came to visit her old friend. Grace says she needs poison, and she's completely serious. Lady Valeria makes fun of who Grace wants to kill this time. Grace explains that her dear sister and the respected Madame Mariel are going to add gelot to her food. She explains why she is so sure that they will poison her, after a short question about the reasons for such confidence. Lady Valeria doesn't understand how she can allow them to harm her, asking Grace about it. Grace replies that this will win once and for all, forcing them to surrender once and for all. Kadia looks at her half-sister in fear, not expecting such results from a less powerful poison. Grace smirks at Kadia through the blood running down her lips. The Duke orders that Grace be taken to her chambers and that everyone not stand in their places. Grace is not surprised by her father's excitement, because the heiress of his house is coughing up blood in front of too many people, which can greatly spoil the impression on people. She is sure that in any case, the very next morning, all sorts of terrible things will be said about Kadia. Alice helps her mistress to her room while she tries not to cough even more. Lady Valeria remains completely perplexed, but looks sharply at her brother, forbidding him to interfere. Riku begins to think that Grace is even crazier than he thought. Grace is relaxing in her room, sitting in a chair. Alice is scared by Grace's next cough. She runs up to her mistress to try to help. Grace asks her not to scream, and at the same time reminds her that her maid is well aware that she tolerates many poisons well, with the exception of a few. Alice is afraid that this will be the very case when the poison turns out to be intolerable. Grace calms her down and says that she has double-checked everything and the poison will not kill her. Alice is worried that her mistress is still in terrible pain from this poison. Grace understands this and is going to wait for the healer from the temple, whom Lady Valeria is supposed to bring. Riku suddenly enters the room, and everyone immediately turns their gaze to him. He asks Grace if she did it on purpose. The boy remembered how Grace smiled through the terrible pain with blood running down her face. Grace was absolutely sure that she had won their next battle and put an end to their feud with her victory. Riku asks about Grace allowing herself to be poisoned. Grace demands that the interested guy not force her to answer this question. Surprised, Riku begins to think Grace is crazy. Grace begins to complain about the healer's expectations, mockingly saying that Lady Valeria wants to kill her, while Alice cannot stop crying from worrying about her mistress. Riku tells Grace that she is a crazy girl, to which she responds in her usual manner for him to shut up and just leave. He asks if this title of heiress is so important to her. She orders him to shut his mouth again because he knows nothing and has no right to tell her anything. But even after this, Riku still treats Grace, which shocks her because she was sure that he only specializes in wind magic. Lady Valeria arrives with a healer, to which Grace begins to say that she was taking too long and was stalling for time. Grace asks how things are going at the banquet. Lady Valeria tells her that there is, of course, chaos and disorder among the confused guests. Grace is sure that everyone has figured out that there is poison in the cake, even though no one will say it out loud. The healer, under Riku's supervision, begins the procedure to treat Grace. Everyone looks at the Duke, who burst into the room and sternly ordered Grace to explain herself. She is ironic that they are asking the victim of poisoning why this happened. The Duke asks if she thinks that some kind of poison could have been added to the cake. Grace suggests they talk in private, to which the Duke, in complete rage, shouts that this is all she cares about. The Duke yells at Grace to simply imagine in her head how many false rumors there will be about Katia by the morning. Grace turns to her close friend Valeria, smirking again in her familiar manner. She guesses that Grace meant for her to leave. Lady Valeria leaves without a word, leaving everyone else behind. Grace and the Duke stand opposite each other, preparing to have a serious conversation, while Riku watches from the side. The Duke talks about the condition of Kadia, who is crying so hard that she could lose her fortune from all the tears that flow. Grace tells the Duke that if her sister had not done anything wrong, she would not have found herself in this situation. The Duke, enraged by Grace's words about Kadia, waves his hand, deciding to hit his own daughter for the first time. Grace squeezes the Duke's hand, stunned by this reaction and her daughter's strength. Grace tells her father that he just wanted to hit and hurt his own daughter. She says she won't let him hit her a second time, and she's grown since he last hit her. The Duke accuses her with words, how dare she speak and treat her father like that, while Grace holds his hand in a tight grip and says that now she has enough strength to resist him. The Duke is frightened by these words of his daughter. He remembers his still small and helpless daughter, at a time when she did not have the strength to fight back. The Duke falls into a complete stupor and numbness from these memories that he cannot even move. The father asks his daughter if she treats Katia so badly because all his attention went to her, and if she thinks that it was because of her that he sent Grace away to distant lands. Grace tells him that he sees everything in too rosy tones, and that he himself does not mean so much to her that she should hate someone just because of him. She adds that she never despised Katia. The Duke screams in horror at how she dares to say such a thing after causing her so much pain. Grace replies that it even sounds stupid, and asks when she ever caused problems for Katia, since even now, she is sick from the willets that she herself took. The Duke again cannot believe what he heard and only says how she could do such a thing. Grace explains that it's because Katia ruined her portion. The Duke yells at his daughter, saying that she doesn't even understand what she's done. She replies that she knows there are rumors that Katia wanted to kill her, but she doesn't see anything wrong with it, and that Katia was the one who falsely accused her first. The Duke shouts again, without softening his voice, that a torn dress and an assassination attempt are completely different things that cannot be compared like this, putting them on the same level. Grace, smiling peacefully, agrees with this, but counters by saying that Kadia would not have stopped doing this if she had not been stopped. The Duke argues and tries hard to break Grace's steadfast belief in her own rightness by saying that Kadia is a good girl. Grace answers him that good girls should not defame the names of their sisters, and since the Duke said that the Duchess was a good woman, she can question this too. The Duke asks if she wants to intimidate Katia with this, to which Grace ridicules this assumption, saying that it is terribly ridiculous, and she is threatening not her sister, but her father. The Duke looks angrily and silently at Grace, who extends her hand to him mockingly. Grace says that any sane nobleman would now assume that Kadia tried to kill her. The Duke promises at the top of his voice that he will not allow this to happen under any circumstances. Grace feigns agreement, confident that her father will fail if he tells everyone that his daughter poisoned herself. The girl says she foresaw this turn of events, and she doesn't throw around accusations without solid evidence. The Duke replies that he cannot believe it. Grace begins to explain to her father why she is so sure. Because Madame Maril cut off a piece of the cake, and Katia insistently asked to try the treat she prepared, and this could fan the flames of rumors. The girl promises to put on a real show for everyone, while her father looks at her with apprehension. She suggests that by searching for the culprit of her poisoning, people will be able to find her mother's case and then become interested in it. The Duke shouts that this is a very mean act on the part of his own daughter. Grace, in contrast to her father's accusation, tells him that she is acting very humanely, because if she really wanted to, she would have gotten rid of her father and these two women long ago. She teaches her father that he should have thought about his safety earlier, or simply not shown his weaknesses. The Duke, frightened by the expression on his daughter's face, asks what she wants from him. Grace smiles excitedly, preparing to give her father some real tough demands. She says that first of all she would like to personally investigate her mother's case, and then she will decide for herself who is guilty of it. The Duke asks her again in bewilderment. Grace says she wants to take over the reins of the estate. Otherwise, she will ruin the lives of those women whom the Duke loves so much. Grace says that her father has been on the throne for too long, and the time has come for a change of ruler. Alice is worried about her mistress. Lady Valeria says there is no reason to worry about Grace. The Duke enters the room, which frightens Alice but leaves just as quickly. Lady Valeria asks her old friend how it all went. Grace replies that the outcome was already determined before their game began. Lady Valeria asks what the outcome of Grace's victory is, which she considers very seriously. Grace replies that it's nothing special, she's just in charge of the estate now. Grace is asked if she really needs this power, which surprises her, and she turns her gaze to the person who asked this immodest question. It turns out to be Riku, who was expecting an answer that was serious to the point of absurdity. Grace wonders if he's asking this to get something from her. Riku asks if it is possible to reason only within such a narrow framework. He explains his question by saying that he does not understand Grace's willingness to make such great sacrifices for the sake of power. Grace thinks thoughtfully and replies that she hasn't lost anything. Riku asks if Grace knew that her body would not be able to cope with such a strong poison, to which the girl answers in the affirmative. Grace replies that it is not difficult for her to risk for the sake of power, even if she risks her life, because the taste of victory overpowers the pain. Riku gives up in his thoughts and doesn't try to understand her train of thought anymore. Grace praises Rick, saying that he did a good job, but asks if he understands that he will gain nothing from spreading rumors about what happened. Grace promises to tell the princess that Riku has fulfilled his role and she lets him go. Riku uses his wind magic and disappears in the middle of the room in front of Alice, Lady Valeria, and Grace. Riku returns to his place and calls out to his assistant, addressing him by name. Leon asks Riku how the banquet went. He answers his question with a question, can a person be brave and scared at the same time? Leon replies that it sounds as crazy as warm iced tea. Riku smirks, agreeing with Leon, asking again that it is impossible. He, taking off his vest, is preparing to say something important, smiling sincerely from the riot of emotions. Riku says that Lady Grace is the living embodiment of this irony for him. Leon is stunned by his master's admission that Lady Grace is afraid of something. Riku says that he will understand everything better if he continues to observe. Grace asks the maid if her father sent away all the guests. The maid gives her mistress a positive answer. Grace asks her where Madame Maril is. She hesitates awkwardly, not daring to answer. The maid replies that Madame Maril will show Kadia to her chambers. Grace comes into Kadia's room, asking her what will happen now, frightening her already anxious sister. Kadia, wrapped in a blanket, turns to Grace, looking with empty eyes, tired from the tears that had tormented her almost non-stop all evening. She immediately throws off her blanket in a rage, finding new strength as she flies up and screams at Grace. Grace jokes that her sister still has the energy to be angry with her. Kadia yells at Grace, accusing her of taking the poison. Grace asks for proof that she took the poison, which shocks Kadia, who did not expect such a turn of events. Grace begins to list how everything looked in the eyes of the guests, which infuriates Kadia, who, like a father, swings at her. She, like the Duke, grabs the hand flying towards herself by the wrist, saying that they are all trying to slap in the same way. Grace says that Kadia has her mother's face, but her temperament is definitely her father's, which really irritates Kadia herself. She squeezes her sister's hand with a smirk and a bright haughtiness, reproaching him that it would have been better if she had inherited her father's looks and her mother's temperament, as Grace herself had done. Kadia screams that she understood what the girl was planning and that she knew everything from the very beginning. Grace calls it stupid that her sister can't stop screaming and repeating that she knew everything. Kadia says that it's all because of Grace, and none of this would have happened if she had never been born. Grace gives her a stern, cold look, but quickly overshadows her emotions with indifference. She reminds her sister of her own words that she would be glad to treat the whole family to this cake, noting that she gets angry when she is lied to, but she herself is no better. Kadia still denies everything and says that there is no lie, trying to somehow maintain her rightness. Grace reminds him that she gave her and Madame Maril a chance, which was a saint-level act of mercy. Kadia quips that Grace always looked down on her and only made fun of her, which surprises Grace herself when she asks Kadia about it. Kadia accuses her of always putting her below herself, and that is why she sent her to the tea ceremony. Grace tells her that she did it to introduce her to influential people, and her feelings of inferiority never cease to amaze her. Kadia swings her other hand at Grace, screaming at her to shut up, not wanting to listen to her any longer. Grace addresses Kadia while holding both of her wrists, causing Kadia to become even more devastated. She begins to explain the full significance of the act she wanted to commit, disgracing her in front of so many people. Grace says that her sister is worthless, since during her year of absence, instead of devoting herself to her studies and ethics, she plotted intrigues that were not worth the time spent. She whispers in Kadia's ear that she was never a threat to her in the first place. Grace pushes the frightened Kadia away, letting go of her hands, which she had been holding the entire time of their conversation. Kadia falls with a crash next to the fireplace, leaning on her hands to at least soften her fall. Grace raises the longsword in her right hand with a smirk, letting Katia know that things are bad. She strikes very close to her sister with this sharp sword, deliberately scaring her. Grace admits that she doesn't care what Katia thinks of her, but she will give her a choice. She gives Katia a choice to resist and die like a broken doll or submit to her and live happily, raising her sword to her sister's neck. Katia begins to apologize in a terrible tremor and admit all her guilt. Grace proudly says it was faster than she thought. Katia swears that she will not do such a thing again, clenching her hands in a swearing grip. Grace tells Katia not to be afraid because she is not going to kill her. Katia still has one chance left, unlike someone who has already lost all their chances. Grace says that it is time to part ways, saying goodbye to Katia until tomorrow. Katia asks what Grace is up to which she replies that she will find out everything herself tomorrow, smirking to the side. Finally, Grace explains that the girl who went against Grace and then began to serve her is from the story that Lady Valeria told herself. Katia is left alone with her thoughts full of shock and hopelessness. The attempt on the life of the heiress of the Winastan family caused a huge stir. This was the beginning of the interest in the relationship between the sisters. Because it could be the answer, many nobles are betting that this will be the key to a complex riddle. Grace announces that she has found the culprit for what happened. All the servants at this moment are shocked and suspect anyone. Madame Mariel is ready to accept the outcome of the culprit as an attempt on her life with complete seriousness. Grace, with a practiced smile, says that she did not believe that someone poisoned the cake, although she emphasizes that she began coughing up blood after it. She happily hugs her devastated sister, who still hasn't recovered from yesterday, by the shoulder, while Grace notes that Katia only baked the cake and Madame Mariel served it to her. Katia looks at her sister worriedly, afraid that she will say too much. Grace says that Katia is her dear younger sister, and Madame Mariel is her head maid who has served them faithfully. All the servants stand in their places, heads bowed to the floor, as Grace continues to bring them up to speed on the situation, adding the fact that she had eaten nothing else that evening. Two young maids look at Madame Mariel with fear and pity. The head maid herself was already humbly awaiting her fate. Grace, sitting in a chair next to Katia, says that she thought for a long time. She says that her dear sister would never poison her, which means that only Madame Mariel remains. The head maid changes her plans and says she's been set up. Grace is ironic and asks Madame Mariel the same question in a haughty tone. She replies that this is all really true. Grace asks who would benefit from this, or if Madame Mariel means to say that she is trying to slander her. Another servant objects and says how can she blame a lady for such a thing? Grace, with one gesture of her hand, orders this servant to be silent at that very moment. The girl acknowledges with respect that Madame Mariel's words are a bold statement, since she believes that she could be honored to have Grace go and slander her. Madame Mariel begins to speak hesitantly, but she is unable to do so because of her own negative feelings. Grace immediately shuts her up, saying that she is not at all interested in her answer and that the question was rhetorical. The girl says that she doesn't think she will accuse someone without any solid evidence, while Madame Mariel herself remembers in her thoughts that she has already gotten rid of the gelot with which she poisoned Grace. Grace turns to Eily and Baron, who are standing at the back of the room. Baron carefully hands something to her mistress. Madame Mariel cannot see what exactly the maid has handed into Grace's hands. Madame Mariel tries to reassure herself that they cannot have any evidence. Grace smiles, holding up the vessel that Madame Mariel thought she had smashed to pieces, leaving nothing behind. She asks ironically, mocking the maid, why she is surprised since everything should look familiar. While Madame Mariel is once again trying to prove her innocence, hiding behind the fact that she was terribly set up, Grace suggests that they immediately ask the seller who sells such drugs about his latest customers. Madame Mariel is horrified that Grace knew everything from the beginning and took poison. She screams furiously at the top of her lungs that Grace did everything just to get rid of her as quickly as possible. Grace replies that her stupidity is only rivaled by her own impudence. Madame Mariel screams that she did it because Grace has the blood of that filthy bastard in her veins, saying that she must apologize to Katia. Grace asks her rhetorically why she thought she had the right to lecture her. She squeezes Madame Mariel's mouth with all her might, shutting her up. All the other servants watch silently, and some are not even able to watch this. They close their eyes. She says that since she contradicts her, since she considers herself superior to her, she becomes convinced that Madame Mariel is one of those maids who consider themselves equal to nobles because they live with them on the same estate. Servant Butler prepares to carry out Grace's order immediately after she calls out to him. Grace orders him to write a letter to Bern Prison, asking them to bring to their senses their maid, who is guilty of an attempt on the life of an aristocrat, and therefore will remain imprisoned until her death. She hits Madame Marie with all her might, causing her to fall down. The maid tries to somehow hold on, leaning her hands on the floor, bowing her head. Grace wishes to teach her the manners and ethics of being a maid while she spends her time in prison. Madame Muriel looks back in horror and glares with animal fear at Grace, who clarifies that she will never see her again anyway. Grace says she will take her tongue as a parting gift. Kadia asks if Grace is really going to send Madame Muriel to prison and burn. Grace advises her sister to think about her own future before thinking about Madame Muriel's future, to which Kadia replies that Grace is not worried about her future. Grace replies that she can bury her underground, knowing Kadia's reputation in high society. Kadia replies that her sister has no evidence against her, and Grace says that she can always create it. She reminds her who searched Madame Muriel's room. Grace says it was oily and barren, suggesting she wanted to frame Madame Muriel, and many would actually believe that. Kadia's hands are shaking from excitement and worry. She reminds him about the witness, and Grace says that she can even bribe him because she has quite a lot of money. She says that she herself would have stopped trying to resist if she were in Kadia's place, because the one Grace herself chooses becomes the culprit. Kadia tries to threaten her sister by telling her father everything. Grace smugly tells her that her father himself ordered her to investigate this case after threats about Kadia's future. She mockingly calls her sister useless, but is glad that this time she was able to help her, finally becoming useful. Grace gives her some advice to make Kadia think about how to get on her good side, hinting that she can poison her at any moment, and she has enough Willets poison left. Kadia falls to the floor in despair, hearing only Grace's retreating steps, and she herself understands that she could not win this battle against her from the very beginning. Grace reads the letter informing her that Madame Muriel has been taken to prison, and then asks the maid about Kadia. The maid says that she hasn't eaten for 2 days, and locked herself in her room. Grace asks if she is even sure that her sister is alive. The maid says she believes that Kadia is still alive. It's obvious to Grace, but the fact that Kadia stays in her room out of fear of her threat scares her. Grace says that her sister takes more than she can eat, recalling that fools are often said to be brave, but Kadia is not even brave, she is just an idiot. Lady Valeria laughs and talks about the logic of Kadia's fear, because she might have to live like the girl who tried to poison her sister, and on top of that, her sister turned out to be Grace. She says that Kadia would not have believed Grace's words that she would allow her to live, provided that she was comfortable with it. Grace asks what she should have told Kadia. She starts to make deliberately mocking faces, giving a very sweet and touching speech about her love for Kadia. Lady Valeria smiles widely at Grace's acting skills, but says that would be more threatening, and she should act like an older sister and extend an olive branch. Grace responded by telling her that it was very easy for Valeria to say that. Lady Valeria acknowledges this, saying that everything can be said easily when it is not your problem. Grace sees no point in discussing this with her any further, and asks Alina to come over. The maid Alina quickly comes to her, asking what is required of her. Grace hands Alina a letter, ordering her to send it to Linda Dweel, who is studying at the academy. She says she's hiring her as head maid. Alice can't believe what she hears. Lady Valeria is also stunned by Grace's plans. Alice asks again if Grace thinks about agreeing to work here as the head maid. Grace says that Madame Muriel has been dragging things down, and now she needs someone smart and proactive who has the proper discipline. Alice says that even the imperial family itself wants her, and Grace thinks that she will agree to work as the head maid, to which the girl asks to simply send a letter. Alice obediently carries out the order given to her by Grace. Lady Valeria says that Grace is something because who would think of hiring the star of the academy as the head maid, to which she replies that she just fits the bill. She again asks not to make her laugh, asking again about Grace's confidence that the academy star will take this job. Grace explains her confidence by saying that she has made her an offer she cannot refuse. She is pleased with the work done and says that all the affairs in the house will now flourish with a bang, to which Valeria asks her about Kadia. She replies that she will come out when she is hungry enough. Grace says her friend has her own important things to do, asking how the rumors about her mother are progressing. Lady Valeria replies that it is very bad because it was a long time ago and almost no one knows about it. Grace tells her friend that she gave her this silk business so that she would find those people who know about it, and therefore gave her this chance with a guy. But Valeria is embarrassed because the business is going well. Lady Valeria sadly replies how her friend could say that about her, and Grace understands that even with her connections, it will be difficult to find the people she is so diligently looking for. Valeria suggests that Grace visit Isolt March, but after thinking it over, Grace replies that she will do it after she settles everything here. Grace says it's none of her business and orders her friend to get the information any way she can. The maids are going to try again to persuade Kadia to at least eat now. Kadia is once again crying from the worries and problems that are swirling around in her head. In her thoughts, there is only Grace, who is capable of ruining her reputation at any moment, and then her whole life. Grace comes to her with the maids. The girl looks at the mess in the room, scolding Kadia for it. Grace tries to start a conversation with her sister, who is terrified. Grace taunts her, as always, that now Kadia is like a goldfish without brains, and now she even looks like one. Kadia silently stares at Grace, who has arrived unexpectedly. Grace asks if Kadia really hasn't eaten for 4 days since she can still scream. She dismisses the maid, saying that she can feed Kadia herself. The maid quickly leaves the room, leaving Grace and Kadia alone. Kadia screams, asking her sister what she's planning now. Grace replies that this should be said by Kadia herself, who has not appeared at events for a long time, does not leave her room, and does not eat. Kadia screams in her mind that this is all because of Grace, but she doesn't dare say it out loud. Grace decides to say that Kadia is neither smart nor brave, and therefore useless to her, that it is already difficult for her to continue to take care of her. Kadia replies that she never asked for care from Grace. Grace explains that she creates everything that Kadia enjoys, down to the smallest details. When her sister asks what Grace is up to, she replies that she wants her to prove her worth. Grace says she has a proposition for Kadia. She says that even though Kadia is from the Winoston family, she behaves ruder than the daughter of the lowest baron. Kadia grimaces, not wanting to listen to her sister. Grace shares her plans to fire all of her sister's teachers. Kadia is stunned and does not understand how Grace can fire them all at once, and she herself explains that she wants Kadia to learn manners, eloquence, foreign languages, music, and art. Grace wants Kadia to be more than just the center of attention at all tea parties, but to be worshipped by everyone in the imperial court. Kadia never ceases to be afraid of her sister and her ambitions, remembering that day that happened just recently when she tried to kill her. Grace tells her that this is the only choice she can make if she wants to live, calling on Kadia to take everything she gives and rise above. She says that all she wants from Kadia is her loyalty, which surprises Kadia. The girl decides that she should change the word to a more appropriate one. Grace says she wants obedience from Kadia. She plans to replace Valeria with her if she can become an informant among high society, but for this, Kadia needs to understand that she will disappear if the House of Winoston falls. Grace says that the Kadia has the right to both refuse and agree, but reminds that she does not care about those who do not benefit her. Kadia, just out of curiosity, asks about her sister's intentions if she wants to refuse, and Grace answers that she will simply marry her to some nobleman. Grace jokes that she will find someone beautiful because Kadia is her family, to which Kadia yells at her to forget about it. Grace orders her to tone down her screaming. Kadia immediately covers her mouth with both hands, very frightened by what she just said. Grace says that she might as well drag Kadia's mother in, as that would only create more furor in rumors and excitement in high society. Kadia shouts at her sister not to dare to touch her mother in this matter. Kadia is left alone and becomes convinced that Grace has the ability to use people as her pieces on the chessboard, just as Lady Valeria said. Grace greets the princess with honor in her castle. The princess greets her and asks for forgiveness for the last time. She asks what happened to her during the party, that she heard about it but decided to ask in person, and Grace thanks her for her concern, calling it a minor incident. The princess says she wouldn't call it that she heard about the head maid who was behind it, asking if she was punished. Grace says the former head maid is already serving her final days in prison in Bern. The princess says that now everything has become much clearer to her. Grace asks if Viscount Windsor is badly hurt. The princess begins to tell her about the man's plight. He survived, although he fell from his horse at the very foot of the mountain, and at times no one believed that he would be able to endure. Grace is lost in her thoughts, thinking that Richard couldn't have forgotten his skills so quickly, since he graduated from the academy with excellent achievements. She asks the princess if magic could be involved, remembering her assumptions with Valeria. The princess begins to think very seriously, completely immersed in her thoughts. She tells Grace that they don't have enough evidence yet to waste time on it. Grace thinks that the princess already has her own thoughts on this matter, but acknowledges the princess's opinion, bowing her head to her. The princess suddenly remembers that she wanted to ask about one very important topic, and breaks the awkward pause. She asks if Riku behaved well at the party. Grace tells her that he behaved very well and cured her of the poison, for which she is still in his debt. The princess is very surprised by this because she knows that both of them are not the type to ask for help and give it. She says smilingly that now Grace knows he can do this and it will help them in the investigation. Grace asks her again about the investigation into missing people with red hair. The princess gives her a positive answer with a heavy sigh. She puts forward her hypothesis that a magician is behind all this. The princess says that the last missing person disappeared inside the house, but the culprit left no trace of entering the house naturally, to which Grace agrees that it was most likely a magician. The princess sighs heavily again from the hopelessness of her situation. Grace says this can only mean one thing. The princess agrees with the girl and admits that it was definitely magic. Grace asks why no one took up the case immediately, but the princess tells her that it was because of the complete lack of evidence of magic at the crime scene. The princess says that this is what takes them back a step, and that is the main problem. She says that this is why she called Grace to her, who was clearly shocked by such a drastic fact. The princess says that she wants Grace and Riku to work together to solve this case, since Grace is the most experienced knight in the entire royal guard. Grace kneels and promises to carry out the princess's orders and bring peace to the empire. Riku complains that without traces, they won't find any evidence. Leon nevertheless reminds him that it was inside this very house that the unfortunate child disappeared. Riku tells him that he is already well aware of the data that they know. He feels that they will be near someone noisy again. Leon asks again about this, not understanding who Riku means. Grace comes in, asking if he was talking about her when he called someone noisy. Riku notes that Grace has remarkable physical abilities to be able to recover so quickly from the powerful poison. He says that she must admit that she is a noisy person, and at this moment the other servants, horrified by the audacity of his words, immediately fall into a strong panic. Grace already says that she is noisy, but ironically asks what he is going to do about it. Grace says that no matter who she is, he will have to work with her, but he can always voice his complaints to her. Riku asks if anything will change if he does this. Grace tells him that, of course, nothing will change at all. Riku replies that he has no complaints then, and Grace praises this, saying that it was wise of him to give up all the useless efforts. He still remembers with interest how she told him not to even think about trying to do it. The girl answers him that there was no point in it then, but now she wants everyone who stands in her way to lose all desire to win and hope for victory. After a short conversation about how Grace has never lost and resorted to dirty methods rather than accept an honest defeat, Riku decides to stop trying to understand her and reminds her of the details of the case. Grace says she remembered them along the way and decides that Rick could use a reminder of the file too. Riku smells a scent near Grace that is very familiar to him. He realizes that he smells jasmine and wonders in his head if the girl is wearing perfume. The guy realizes that this perfume is different from the one he wore at the banquet. Grace says the case could be quite dangerous because of the mages involved. Riku says that she has nothing to worry about and that he thinks Grace's powers could handle a crowd of mages on her own, to which the girl jokes that she can test it on the nearest mage. Grace doesn't understand why Rick is laughing and he looks embarrassed. Grace says that this matter will be dangerous in any case, and she still has to worry about the redheads in her house, and Riku asks who would dare to interfere with the Duke. The girl explains that Katia could still get caught and become a victim, and she is worried, which surprises Riku because he thought that their relationship was bad. The assistant comes to Grace and Rick and says that the conversation with the boys' parents is over, and the person who repaired their pipes really turned out to be Zack. He says that with difficulty, but still they were able to remember him from the portrait. Riku replies that he knew it and makes a new guess in his head. He says that Zack was involved in every missing persons case, and now they can learn something with his help. Grace says that it would be more logical to focus on Zack now, and if anything happens, the princess can help them. The servant says that someone has come to Grace with a message for her. Grace can't understand who suddenly needs her. She sees a carriage passing through the window that belongs to her family. A worried Alice comes out to meet her. She says that their affairs are very bad and there are problems in the estate. Grace asks what has already happened and what has already happened. Alice says that Ionel Manaska has come to their estate with a strange box, and she wants to see Katia. Grace asks Rika to wait for her so that they can meet later at the estate. Riku dissuades Grace and advises her to return home while he starts investigating the case alone. She agrees and leaves while Riku just watches after her. Riku doesn't understand why she's in such a hurry and assumes that she's thinking that Ionel Manaska might harm her sister. Grace runs as fast as she can and asks the first servant where Yanel is. He replies that she is in Katia's room. Grace immediately orders the door to be opened before Alice can catch up with her. Immediately, she sees Ionel not at all with joy. Ionel Manaska is surprised by Grace's visit, telling the others to look who's here. Grace immediately rudely tells her that she forgot herself there. Ionel replies that she only wanted to give a gift, which she was unable to give because she missed the banquet that Katia organized in honor of her birthday. Grace asks about the gift, saying that she could have given a dead rat, to which Ionel asks not to be so angry. Grace starts talking again about how Ionel's hobby is getting rid of anyone who gets on her nerves, and that's why she was expelled from the military academy. Ionel notes that her old friend remains as sarcastic as she was before. Grace turns towards Katia, addressing her seriously. A frightened Katia looks at her and Grace asks to leave her and Ionel alone. Here, Ionel turns to Katia with greater courtesy. She asks Katia to take the gift from her before she leaves, and even if she herself became the Duke's daughter, she should not refuse Manaska's good wishes. Grace orders her to just leave, saying that they have always rejected everything Manaska has offered them, and nothing will change if Katia refuses. Ionel says that Katia is new to high society, and she would not like to be talked about for how arrogant she is by asking herself the same question. Grace again orders her to just leave. Kadia decides to just take the gift. A huge fat spider flies out at her and the Kadia is terrified. Grace stops him and suffers a spider bite on her hand. The girl throws the spider on the floor so that it melts on it. Yanel screams in horror at what she did to her Catherine. Grace says Ianiel could have come up with a better name. Ianel screams at how Grace dared to kill her pet. Grace says she had no other choice but to let that demonic monster attack Kadia. Ianel shouts that no one would care about a commoner who crawled out of nowhere, to which Grace orders Aliona to take the Kadi to her room right now. The maid Alina escorts the Kadi to her room, and Yanel looks after them angrily. Ianel tries to hurt Grace by telling her that she is so lonely that she is ready to accept a commoner as a sister, and that she feels very sorry for Grace for this. Grace says that she has the strength to care for others, but Yanel does not, and she herself needs protection. She says that Yanel herself could not achieve anything, but in everything she receives the support of the Duke of Manaska, due to the fact that she is the eldest daughter in the family. Grace adds that the Duke helped her get into the academy despite her skills, and then watched her get kicked out for hanging out with boys. Yanel furiously screams at Grace to take back everything she said. Grace wonders why Yanel's younger brother didn't kill her. If she were in his place, she would have killed her to become the sole heir. Yanel starts using magic and threatening Grace that if she doesn't stop, things will go badly for her. Grace, holding her by the neck, pins her to the wall with the sharpest jerk. She tells Ianel not to go near the Winaustons even once again. Ianel says that Grace will pay for what she did, and Grace says that Ianel doesn't understand what awaits her for bringing a demonic monster into the Winauston estate. Ianel again says with caustic contempt that Kadia is just a commoner whom Grace mistook for a sister. Grace tells her to shut up and says that Kadia Winauston, to which Ianel says that Kadia's blood is dirty, to which Grace replies that Ianel herself is no better. Grace throws Ianel to the floor with all her might. She specifically suggests that Ianel use some of her spells. Yanel only yells in response so that Grace doesn't think she won't use them. Grace says that whoever Janelle Manaska thinks she is now on Winauston land. She says that she never lets those who attack her on her own land leave alive. Yanel shouts haughtily that they will see how long this precious Winauston estate will stand. Grace begins to think that Ianel has gone completely crazy. She says that she will pay dearly for coming into conflict with Kadia, and she should think about her future rather than hers. Ianel disappears using magic, and Grace breathes a sigh of relief. Grace orders Butler to write a letter to the Manaska household, in which they will make a formal warning as to why they are keeping their knights around. She suddenly meets Kadia in the corridor, waiting for her alone. The girl asks her sister why she is still here. Kadia, terrified, asks if Yanel has left. She also wants to know if it was really a demonic monster that almost attacked her. Grace says that's exactly how it happened, and Kalia collapses in disappointment and asks Grace why Janelle did it. Kadia asks herself why everyone is so cruel to her. Grace says she felt the same way a few weeks ago. Kadia is hysterical and asks why they all have problems with her. Grace replies that high society has always been like this, and Kadia doesn't need to think she's so important. Kadia comes to the conclusion that everyone in high society must be a monster. Grace says it took her a long time to figure this out, asking if she had found a way to survive among them. She is not surprised, only saying that people do not change, and Kadia is becoming more and more disillusioned with high society. Grace tosses a ring to Kadia, to which she asks her what it is. Grace explains that although no one would dare harm Winauston now, she would feel calmer if she knew where Kadia was. She says that she needs to know where her sister is so that if she is killed, she can at least bury her in the family crypt, which makes Kadia very scared. Grace comes to the conclusion that her sister at least wants to live. She orders Butler to monitor the location of the accessories every day with tracking spells and report their location to her. The butler obediently obeys and promises to carry out the new assignment. Grace is about to go about her business, but then someone suddenly calls out to her. It turns out to be the Duchess, who greets Grace with a joyful smile. Grace asks why she called her. The Duchess invites her to have a cup of tea together. Grace agrees, and here they are at the tea ceremony. The Duchess says that this new tea only arrived to them a few days ago, and Grace understands why it is so special. She asks Grace if she likes the aroma of the tea, and the girl replies that she thinks it's not bad. The Duchess shares her joy about this with her, but then she suddenly asks about Grace's well-being. The Duchess says that Grace was poisoned a few days ago and how she feels now. Grace doubts that the Duchess is genuinely concerned about her. She says that she has already recovered. The Duchess replies that this is a relief for her, but if Grace gets worse, then she should definitely tell her. The Duchess says she would like to talk about Meryl, but decided it was better not to ask about her, because she did something she should never do to a child. Grace replies that she is not a child, but the Duchess tells her the complete opposite, citing herself as an example of how frivolous she was. After Grace's response that the nobles are different, the Duchess still says that to them they will always remain children, and Grace does not understand what she is trying to say. The Duchess admitted that she knew about Kadia's dislike for Grace and tried to stop her, but she would not listen. Grace listens to all this, realizing that Kadia has someone who will apologize for her, and Grace's mother would severely scold her if she did something like that. She says that she never forgave Kadia, and the Duchess replies that she gave her a second chance, which is already forgiveness. Grace realizes that she envies Kadia for having such a mother, even though she wouldn't have achieved everything she has now if she had such a mother. She says she heard that the Duchess had lost some of her memories. Although she got better, she can't remember anything related to Grace's mother. At first, she tried to stop her father because there was no evidence of the stranger's testimony. Grace guesses that he didn't listen to her. She learns that her mother ran away 2 days after the incident, which would be extremely stupid, and Grace suspects even more that something is fishy here. The Duchess is glad that she was able to talk to Grace, and she has always wanted to do so. Grace is surprised and asks her again, and the Duchess adds that she only wanted to make sure in appearance whether she was similar to Ryan, but now she has found out that she is as stubborn as he is. Grace decides to remain silent, but in her mind she notices that this is not a very pleasant thing to discuss. She says that all she has heard about Madame Mariel is that she is being punished according to her crime, to which the Duchess takes on a sad look. The Duchess thanks the girl for the conversation, and Grace changes the subject and starts another conversation. Grace tells the Duchess to be stricter with the new head maid when she arrives, as closeness to the servants could upset the hierarchy in the house. The Duchess promises that she will try and says goodbye to Grace, leaving for her room. A guest knocks on Grace's door, and the girl replies that they can come in, and then she welcomes them. A girl comes to see Grace. It's Linda Dwale. She is surprised by Grace's early rise, which she draws her attention to at the beginning of the conversation. After talking about Grace not being able to sleep last night and having a lot of work to do, Linda decides to ask right away if Grace is really going to follow all the employment terms she wrote about. Grace replies that she will, of course, comply with all of them, offer a salary 3 times higher than that of the assistants at the academy, and in 2 years, Linda will be able to buy an estate in the capital. Linda says she is more interested in the second part, and Grace replies that she will recommend her for the post of future Minister of Finance, and ask the princess for a letter of appointment from the emperor. But in return, Grace demands that no one in this house dare challenge her, and no one find a vulnerability here. Linda promises that this is exactly how it will be. Riku sits on the windowsill and looks at the view from the window. Grace calls him, to which he turns to her in surprise. She asks what he is doing here when he has a big room with a beautiful view. The guy replies that he likes it here too, and the girl just calls him very strange. Riku turns completely towards Grace. He notices that the girl has a new scent again. The guy decides to ask her directly if she knows the perfume business, because she uses new perfumes every time, and the girl only asks how he noticed it. Riku only tells her that mages don't like anything artificial, to which Grace says that Ianel uses heavier perfumes. He tells her that all magicians who are fixated on something other than magic have very serious problems, and in this regard, Monaska have long forgotten what it means to be a magician. Grace says she's surprised that he's so serious. Riku notes that he can smell blood very clearly. He asks Grace if she was hurt. She tells him no, hiding the real truth. Riku doesn't understand why she's trying to hide this from him. However, the guy decides that it is simply none of his business and he will not interfere with it. Grace asks how the search for information on Zack, who is connected to all the missing people, is going. Riku replies that they are finding almost nothing on him. Grace suggests that instead of following him, they just meet him. Riku says that it could become risky, and Grace says that his search is not yielding the desired results. Grace says that they won't solve anything if they just try to watch. She says she doesn't want to make things worse, but just offers to visit him in person. Riku says that Zack can easily tell the culprit everything. Grace tells him that she understands this herself, so they need to keep Zack in sight, and that will be better than what they are doing now. Riku thinks hard about all the risks that could come from this meeting. She comes quite close to him, smiling mysteriously. Riku, surprised, asks what Grace wants. Grace says that the story of the reckless, yet brave magician will quickly spread among the nobles, because no one dared to refuse Grace, and if he does, he will find himself in the spotlight. She puts Rick in an awkward position, because he hates it when people bother him, and in this case, they will not leave him alone at all. Riku tells them to head out immediately to meet Zack. Grace smiles at him, extremely pleased with herself, and the guy understands that she knows perfectly well how she can scare anyone. Riku says that in this case, he will follow the girl in the alleys so that nothing bad happens to her, and she replies that she has never been in the alleys. The guy says the girl looks like someone who eats bandits for breakfast, to which she fiercely asks him again. He puts his cloak on her so that people around her won't recognize her. Gray asks how Riku will disguise himself. He replies that everything will be fine and they will travel by carriage. Grace already wants to ask Riku something, but he starts using magic to move them. In the alleys, a little smiling girl sells beautiful roses. She offers to buy a rose to a girl passing by who didn't even look at her flowers. The girl begins to feel sad looking at her lonely rose. Then it falls out of her hands and she notices wind magic nearby. The girl notices Riku and Grace, whom she mistook for two magicians. Grace asks Riku if they always have to draw attention to themselves like this, and he asks her in response why mages need to walk when they can teleport. Grace notes in her head that all mages are the same. Then a young flower saleswoman suddenly runs up to them and offers to buy a bouquet. Grace thinks about it and suddenly starts to panic a little, which surprises Rika. A whole crowd of saleswomen runs up to the girl. A little girl selling roses runs up to Rick offering to buy them for his beloved. He replies that she got it all wrong. The girl really insists on buying him flowers for that girl to show how much he loves her. Riku tries to tell her that he and Grace are not a couple. The girl and Riku look towards Grace, who is helping other vendors and buying flowers from them and giving them to them. The saleswomen, delighted and shocked, thank Grace and leave. The girl decides to see what Riku is doing at this moment. Grace watches the scene as the girl with the flowers almost bursts into tears in front of Riku. He buys the entire bouquet of roses from her, and she quickly pushes him to give it to that girl. The girl happily hopes that Riku will please his beloved with a speech about how much he likes her. She runs away and wishes them happiness in their relationship. Grace notes that the little girl is very good at selling flowers. Riku starts to argue that she didn't understand the situation, and Grace replies that children can't understand her. Grace says she respects them. All those who work and earn their living through honest labor, each of them is worthy of respect. Riku starts to argue and say that it is useless work. Grace responds by saying that every job has a purpose, and people just make themselves unnecessary. In her mind, she remembers Katia, thinking that these children are much better than her, just crying in her room. Riku begins to suspect that they all have some kind of goal. Riku gives a bouquet of luxurious roses to Grace, who is awkwardly surprised by this unexpected gift. She asks him out of surprise what he is doing. The guy replies that the little girl told him to give this bouquet to her. Grace tells him to throw away this bouquet. Riku starts saying that that girl will be very upset if she sees that bouquet in the trash. The girl is seriously thinking about something, pondering her decision. She accepts the bouquet from Riku, taking it for herself, but complaining that he is taking advantage of her bringing them here. Riku and Grace enter a gloomy and almost empty old house. Riku passes by a girl with pink hair who was yelling at Zack that they had customers. Grace asks if Zack is here often, to which the girl is terribly rude to her and does not want to have a normal conversation. Grace tosses one of her luxurious pieces of jewelry into her hands. Her face immediately changes and she says that he has been giving her big tips lately, and Grace guesses in her mind that someone is paying him serious money. The girl decides to ask the stranger who she is, but in response, Grace only says that it is none of her business and orders her to leave. Grace continues walking through the house looking for Zack. She turns to the side, brightly surprised by what she sees. Zack mumbles in a pathetic whine about why they are doing this to him again. Grace is mentally happy that she finally met Zack. Zack is rushing to get dressed as quickly as possible. Zack suddenly froze and asked in surprise what was going on. Ignoring the guy's words, Grace slightly adjusts her hair. Suddenly, she turned and looked at Zack. Zack was stunned. He blushed and was speechless when he met Grace's gaze. Grace asked the guy if he was really Zack. Zack didn't notice Riku teleporting behind him. Zack extends his hand to Grace, noticing her beauty, asking what brought her here and how he can help. Suddenly, Zack falls painfully to the floor. He does not understand how it happened because he was standing motionless. The reason for the fall was Riku, who pushed the guy forward with his magic. Zack was surprised that it was magic. Riku leaned over to the fallen guy and didn't understand how Zack immediately recognized Grace, but the guy didn't stop and wanted to know what brought the magician to such a place. Riku rudely told Zack that it was none of his business and that all he had to do was answer their questions. Grace looked down at the fallen guy, saying that she had heard that he had been making quite a bit of money lately. Nervously, Zack tried to figure out how she knew about this. Grace, still smiling, replied that everyone knew what generous tips he gave. Zack said he didn't do anything illegal for money. The girl wondered how it was that a repairman living in the alleys suddenly earned a large sum of money, but at the same time claims that he did nothing illegal to achieve this. At Grace's feet, Zack insisted that he had earned them by doing renovations and that she should believe him. The girl thought about the fact that Zack would not have stayed if he did not know where the money came from, and this means that behind him stands a stately nobleman who has the resources to pay him serious sums. She thought about how Zack wasn't surprised by the mage, which meant he had seen magic before somehow, and it turned out that the Manaska were really involved in this. Grace throws one of her fancy pieces of jewelry to the floor, to which Zach only asks what it is. She understands that he doesn't even find the jewelry tempting, but she still says that it is his reward. Grace puts on the hooded cloak that Riku gave her and threatens to come again, and that Zach should remember how he earned all that money during her absence. Riku and Grace leave in silence, both in their own thoughts that were heavy from everything that had happened. Grace says that there was definitely something fishy there, asking Riku about it, who replies that he felt traces of magic. The girl immediately asks her partner about this again. She asks what he means by this. Riku says that someone deliberately erased the traces of magic, but he was able to sense a faint trace in the room, while Zach sensed nothing. Grace admits that she never even thought about it. Riku seriously wonders if it is possible to erase the traces of mages if their energy never leaves them immediately after birth. He says that it's becoming a serious problem for them, because there is someone who can erase traces of magic, and Grace asks if it's that important. Riku replies that there are only 2 mages who can do that, and Grace asks who they are. The guy says that he and his father, who couldn't have been involved in this, are now very far away, which means that someone else knows how to erase traces of magic. He says he needs to figure this out, that there might be other ways to erase magic. Grace asks if he thinks that Liberton could very well be behind all of this. Riku replies that it's just funny and that Liberton has no need to do such things. Grace admits that Liberton is indeed a unique place in the Adelaide Empire, and they could be more frightening than Manhwa if they put their minds to it. Riku tells her not to worry, and the Grand Duke will give up the empire, even if it is handed to him on a silver platter. Grace asks him how he can be so sure of this. Riku says that he has his own ways of finding out information and swears on his life, and Grace asks if his life is so precious. He admits in his head that he doesn't trust Grace. Grace says she was just joking, but she understands that Liberton would be quiet now, and they would focus on Manhwa. She admits that they have set out bait today, so they need to wait until they are caught. Riku extends his hand to Grace, to which she asks why he is doing this. He tells her that he can't just leave her in the alleys. The guy asks her to let him take her back to the mansion. Grace smiles wryly and reminds him of his words about her looking like someone who eats gangsters for breakfast in the alleys. Riku replies that it was just a joke, but now it's something completely different. He teleports them using his wind magic. Grace looks at the bouquet Riku gave her, shining in a beautiful vase, noticing the beautiful cleanliness around her. She begins to feel confident that Linda is doing a great job. The entire Winoston family sits down to eat. The Duke asks what Grace did with the house. She tells him that she just got rid of the horrible tulip decorations. The Duke starts yelling at her, banging his fists on the table, saying that the house is terribly noisy because the new head maid is constantly scolding the maids. Grace tells him to order the maids to be quieter, but if he is unhappy with something in the house, then let him try to regain his authority. She asks if the Duchess gave Linda permission to do all this. The Duchess tells the girl that she approves of everything, and Grace happily tells her father about it. Grace is about to leave because she won't eat dessert, but the Duchess decides to ask if she minds if the man who helped her and Kadia in the past comes to them tomorrow. The Duke asks why Milena is asking Grace for permission to do this, since the Weinstein mansion is their home. Grace says she doesn't need her permission to do this. The Duchess thanks her family for this. Kadia asks her mother if she is talking about Owen, and the Duchess replies that she is talking about him. The Duke immediately begins to ask about him, having learned that he is a man, but the Duchess says that he is just a friend. Grace can't believe her father is actually jealous. A servant meets the girl to tell her about the problem with tracking her jewelry, and Grace asks what happened to them. She reads the letter that the servant gave her, finding it interesting. Grace begins to get ready to go about her business. The Duchess comes and asks where she is going. The Duchess introduces a guest who is considerably taller than all of them, that his name is Owen Grain, and he himself is the owner of his own theater. He says that he was supposed to come in the afternoon, but due to circumstances, he came in the morning. He bows his head and greets Grace, wiping away the beads of sweat from his forehead that had been pouring down from his haste and excessive excitement. Grace notices that their tall guest has red hair, and she notes this fact for herself and begins to keep it in mind so that her investigation does not miss anything. She greets her guest kindly in return, and also sweetly tells him to feel at home. Owen awkwardly decides to say that it is a great honor for him to meet her. The girl decides to notify the Duchess of her imminent departure. The Duchess warmly wishes Grace a very productive day, and that she herself has a good time, while Owen remains a little worried, but also wishes her a good day. Grace hopes that they remember the case of missing people with red hair, and that everyone will be careful, especially in the very center of the empire, while she goes about her business. The girl meets Riku for a wonderful tea party in a luxurious palace, which is decorated in every detail with exquisite ornaments. emphasizing all the wealth of the estate. Grace takes a sip from the beautiful small cup under her neat hand, which she has comfortably grasped, holding it with the confidence that she can even not look at it, closing her eyes. A gloomy-looking Riku, with tired eyes but in amazing clothes, asks the guest who came to him about the fact that she came to him to say that Zack went to the tavern yesterday. Grace confidently tells him that this is exactly why she came to visit him. Riku was completely sleep-deprived, and therefore he had almost no strength to fully wake up and come to his senses. He irritably asks the girl if she knows what time it is. The guy, crossing his arms over his chest, says that she could have asked what time he went to bed last night. He complains, knowing that he will hardly be able to get through to her. Grace, imitating his pose, crosses her arms but also crosses her legs, and in a tone that everyone around her can hear, says that this doesn't bother her at all. The girl says that all the surveillance accessories are not working, and that surveillance of Zack was unsuccessful, to which Riku asks why this happened, since Zack's earring led them to the tavern. She tells Rick that Zack threw the earring away at the tavern, and this is their main problem, which both helps and leads to another dead end in their investigation. Riku suggests that he could have simply sold it. Grace completely denies his guess, cutting it off at the root, and replies that she ordered her knights to find her yesterday, taking out a piece of jewelry from her inside pocket. She shows her assistant the earring that the knights found in the trash can. Riku understands everything and comes to the conclusion that the person he met at the tavern knew that there was a tracking spell on the earring. Grace breaks into a wide smile and says that this is a very good lead that will greatly help advance their case and narrow down the circle of suspects. Riku asks Grace if it's that important to her, and if she's that happy that they've had at least some success. Grace happily tells him that she can't help but be so happy when they have a new lead, while Riku in his mind compares her joy to that of a little girl. The girl says that their progress will make the princess very happy, and Riku remembers all his thoughts about the relationship between the princess and her partner, which makes his expression gloomy. The young man says that if something happens to the princess, then Grace's life will lose all goals and strength to achieve them. Grace confronts him seriously about his words, asking him to repeat what he just said. Riku tries to play the fool and tells her that he didn't say anything, and the girl accuses him of daring to speak about the princess like that. He replies that although he may be rude, this is not something that should be on their minds right now, and the investigation is more important than such fleeting trifles. Grace looks at the guy in surprise, even changing her gaze, asking him again, not believing the magician's words that he truly knows that he can be rude to other people. Riku replies that, let's say he understands all this perfectly well, but that then it changes their situation, sincerely not paying as much attention to it as the girl does. Riku uses his wind magic and teleports himself and Grace away, leaving Leon alone with a stack of papers flying all over the room, which are mixed up in a chaotic mess. Leon, with a leaflet flying onto his forehead, burning with all the irritation from the morning, whines to himself hysterically about how he doesn't understand at all what's wrong with these two. Riku and Grace enter the tavern, lit by soft lighting and tables set up to await customers, while the researchers speak with the bartender. They learn that a girl in a robe came here and used magic to take the jewelry from Zack's hands, and she was dressed in such a way as to remain as anonymous as possible. Grace goes over in her head the options of who it could be, considering that the girl in the robe didn't even want to touch an ordinary commoner. She comes to the conclusion that it could have been the ill-fated Enel Manaska, and in her disgust for the common people, she could not even doubt it. It's already late evening, and the day is drawing to a close. Riku asks if Grace means Enel Manaska from the Manaska house, to which the girl confirms this. Grace recalls one fact about her, that Enel Manaska didn't even go to the library, because she didn't want to touch the books that commoners had touched before her. Riku answers her with a laugh that she could have simply not wanted to study at all, and that this served her only as a convenient excuse, which became a cover for her petty soul that she did not even want to study. Grace replies that he simply doesn't know what she's like, since he hasn't lived next to her for a whole month, which would be real torture for any living soul. She says that Enel divides all people into two types, which is her most terrible trait, which created such a terrible attitude towards people. Enel Manaska uses commoners only for her own amusement and then for murder, but at least she considers the former to be dolls for her vile game. Riku says that even Manaska can't completely erase traces of their magic, which means someone else is involved, and they could have gotten away to completely erase traces of their magic. Grace says that they don't have enough data to be able to immediately accuse anyone, but she gives an example that this whole situation would only benefit the anti-imperialists. Grace admits that if House Manaska is indeed involved in this matter, things are bad for them, since she was never able to gain access to them. and it will be more difficult for Riku, since he is from a lower class. Riku says with disdain that they don't deserve to be magicians at all. He begins to tell that spells from powerful magicians can be even more noticeable than any others. He demonstrates his wind magic by wrapping a stream of wind around his palm. The wind continues to rise higher and higher, and the powers of his spell are clearly visible around Riku's hand. Grace thinks seriously, but still can't bring herself to voice it. Grace asks Riku if he can recognize a spell that is several days old. He replies that he can. The girl begins to tell that there is a spell on their estate, which Yanel did when she came to them to give Katia a gift, but only threw a demonic monster at her. Riku says that even for Monask this is low. He asks her if that's why she smelled of blood that day. She replies that it is just a small demonic monster. His face immediately changes, which is what Grace asks him about. Riku asks the girl why she didn't tell anyone, and Grace replied that she didn't see the point. He asks what she did with the monster, to which she replies that she killed it. Riku realizes that he can no longer smell blood around her, but admits that she acted terribly recklessly. He tells her that he still can't understand her at all. Grace suggests coming to her estate this evening. Riku replies that he won't be able to because of his business and will come to her tomorrow morning. He leaves after a ridiculous conversation with Grace, in which she treated him like he was a child while arranging a meeting. The guy, although touched by this, admits that it is very stupid. The very next morning, Riku comes to Grace's estate. She asks if he found out anything, and Riku replies that he understands for sure that Zack met with a mage from the Manaska house. Grace, happy that they have made progress on their case, begins to think about how to keep the investigation focused. The girl thinks about what evidence they now need to find of Manaska's guilt in this case, and then lock them up in prison. At this point, Riku's expression becomes very frightened. Grace asks him what he just felt, why he looks so puzzled. Riku asks if there was another mage here besides Yanel. Grace replies that there was no one except Yanel and her pocket monster. Riku explains that he senses an ancient and forbidden spell from 2 mages in this room. Grace asks again about this ancient and forbidden magic. Riku realizes that since Grace isn't a mage, she can't know much about it, and asks if she knows how the redhead curse started. Grace asks him if this is not just a false rumor that William I spread to kill his older sister, Duchess Liliat. Riku begins to tell about how at that time Wilhelm was insane and wanted to obtain the power to bring back the dead in exchange for the death of the living. Many were against him in such magic, but it was precisely this that helped him ascend to the imperial throne. But William was manipulated by the nobles into executing his own older sister. But a close friend of his sister brought punishment upon him, and Wilhelm did not receive the support and attention he wanted. Eventually, Princess Gloria ascended to the throne and continued the legacy, giving the mage a plot of land where he could live in solitude. Grace asks Riku that only someone from the Libertines can solve their problem. Riku just remains silent, starting to think about his own things. Grace remembers that another guest, Riku, came to visit them, who was interrupted by the thought that the Monasks were descended from the Libertan lineage and could interfere with ancient magic. The girl cannot believe that Rick could be involved in Manaska's plan, since he was always just around Kadia and the Duchess. Then the Duchess suddenly calls Grace. She immediately turns towards the doors from which the couple came out. Riku looks at Grace, understanding her surprise at such a big surprise. Rick and the Duchess walk towards the newlyweds. Riku immediately realizes that this man is not a mage. He turns to Grace, trying to find out what she is thinking. She greets Rick and the Duchess again, saying that she is glad to meet them. The Duchess says that Rick visited them again because he never got to see Katia, to whom he had been like a father since she was very young. Rick tries his best to justify himself to Grace, that he can't even compare to the Duke. He was just there for Katia when she was a child. Grace and Riku immediately exchange glances, realizing that they noticed the same oddity, which seemed exactly like that to them in Rick's behavior. The Duchess invites Rick and Grace to have dinner together, since they met anyway. Riku says that he won't be able to come, apologizing to the Duchess, saying that he feels sorry to miss this meal. Grace says that she too will not be able to come because of her business, and the Duchess wishes them a good time, not delaying them from their business any longer. Grace says she has noticed a very interesting oddity that she finds significant. Riku asks what the girl is talking about. She tells him that Rick reacted very strangely when the girl jokingly said that the Duke would not like it, and he immediately perked up. Riku says that they can't suspect him yet, since he's not even a mage yet, and Grace replies that no one else entered the reception area. Riku replies that they are at least certain that Enel, Manaska, and Zack are involved in this matter. The guy advises to take this information to the princess and ask her advice. Grace replies that she will do it first thing. Rick, the Duchess, and Katia are sitting at the table, and Rick gives Katia some ivory jewelry, which makes her very happy, although Rick himself tries to defend himself, saying that he put his heart into this jewelry. Kadia says that he gave her similar jewelry in her distant childhood. He says that although the Duke gives her much better jewelry, he tried for her to make this gift, and asks if she wants to go to the theater. Kadia replies that she will have free time in the next few days, and she will be able to go to the theater one of the days. Everyone happy with this news continues to chat, enjoying each other's company. The princess apologizes for her late call. Grace apologizes to her, bowing her head and kneeling, that the only thing she knows is that the Manaskis are involved in the missing persons incidents. The princess says that this is enough, and now they need to find out what the Manaski are doing, and Grace asks if the princess has a plan. The princess tells her that she has a plan, and that's why she keeps Riku next to her. Grace believes in Riku's powers as a mage, but she cannot be sure that he will be able to investigate the Monasks case as a commoner. The princess says that Riku is a mage to the core. She starts talking about the code of magicians that every magician has, and that's why Riku was so angry when he found out about the use of ancient spells. The princess says not to worry about Riku, who definitely already has a plan, and Grace advises to investigate other possibilities. Grace loyally commits herself to follow her orders and promises to fulfill the princess's will. Grace is already walking back through the palace, lost in her thoughts. Suddenly, she meets Rika at the same place. He turns to face her, sitting on the same windowsill. Grace asks him why he is sitting here like a fool again. She tells him not to worry about her anymore, since she won't be able to do anything with the Monasks anymore. Riku says that this only means one thing, and it's not in their favor. Grace confirms that she will have to leave, as the treaty prohibits noble houses from engaging in open conflict in public. The girl reminds him of the Monasks' dislike for commoners like Riku, so that he should be more careful with them. He asks what will happen if he disobeys her and angers the Monaskovs. The guy asks what he will do if he pisses them off, and Grace tells him that then they will just kill him like an insect, and his life will be worth nothing to them. Riku tells her that he didn't mean that at all. He asks her what she will do if they attack him. Grace tells him not to worry, and the princess values her servants and will ensure his safety. Riku thinks that he knew it would be like this, but asks her if that's all she wanted to say. Grace tells him to be polite to others and not talk to them like he does to her. Riku reproaches her, and the girl replies that she is doing this for his own good, because many nobles can end up like Manaski. Grace says she doesn't know if they'll ever see each other again, but wishes him luck. Riku is sure in his thoughts that they will definitely meet again. Grace is in her room at her desk, filling out paperwork. Then a servant suddenly comes running, screaming that something bad has happened. A frightened Grace asks the servant what happened. He replies that it is already after 8 p.m. and Kadia has not returned home. Grace screams in horror at what happened, unable to believe it. The girl asks what happened to the knights who were with her sister. The servant says that there were 6 knights with her, from whom they never heard anything. Grace asks what time Kadia disappeared, remembering that their knights are in many ways even better than the emperor's. The servant says that they lost contact with the knights 2 hours ago. Grace orders him to track down the ring she gave to Kadia. The girl orders her personal maid Alice to use a magical device to contact Lady Valeria, to which Alice obediently follows the order. Lady Valeria asks what happened that made Grace decide to call her through magic. Grace tells her that Kadia is missing. Lady Valeria suggests that she might just be having fun with someone and not have disappeared at all, since she also wanted to go to the theater. Grace explains to her that they couldn't even contact the knights, and things are very bad for them. The girl asks her friend to notify everyone, all the social clubs and gatherings in Adelita. Lady Valeria says that because of this, for some time the rumors can only grow about her family. Grace loses her temper and yells at her to just tell her already, but she doesn't care about such trifles anymore. One servant bursts into the room and says that things are even worse for them. She shows her her own ring, saying that it was found in an alley near the theater, next to unconscious knights. Grace asks her to check if Zach's estate has been called for repairs. She tells her that repairs are always carried out by a group of professionals, to which Grace replies that she already knows everything, but wants to double-check. Another servant runs towards them, calling Grace. She asks what has already happened again. A serious Riku approaches her, and Grace is even more surprised by everything. Riku says that Zach is dead. He asks what's wrong since Zach's death, and the fact that someone removed the last traces of magic from his room couldn't have been just a coincidence. Grace tells him that Kadia is missing. She tells him that it's most likely related to the missing redheads case. The girl says that first they will go to her office, and orders the servant to convey the order to Aliona to wait for a call from Valeria. Grace says that since Zach was killed not by magic, but physically, she will send her knights, who are accustomed to field conditions, with him. Riku asks if she will go with him. Grace replies that she must find her sister first, which surprises Riku, who thought she despised her. Riku asks if this means she is worried about her sister. Grace furiously asks him if he even realizes what he's saying, while Riku genuinely doesn't understand why she's so angry at him for asking such questions. The guy says that he doesn't understand why the girl is so angry at him. He continues his thought and says that this is a great chance to get rid of her sister, whom she despises, and Grace starts yelling at him, asking if he is making fun of her. The girl begins to explain that it is a terrible insult that someone dared to touch the lady of her house with a finger, and Riku tells her in response that this is a good opportunity to get rid of Kadia without getting his hands dirty. She shouts back at him that she doesn't need such a handout from an arrogant rat, and that if she wanted to, she would have gotten rid of Kadia long ago. Riku is in silent shock. There is fear on his face and a lump in his throat, because of which he cannot squeeze out any kind of answer. Grace promises that as long as she runs the house, no one will dare touch anything here. If she does not give something up voluntarily, then no one has the right to touch what belongs to her, and only to her. Riku asks her why her home is so important to her. Grace begins to explain to him that she has always considered herself to be the Winnestein house, and vice versa since the day she was born. This is what she is proud of and what she lives for, and that is why she is trying to save her sister. So she orders Rick to start doing his job, stopping asking stupid questions. Riku agrees and bows before her, but if he helps her find Lady Kadia, saying that he will be a better mage in searching for the missing one, Grace is irritated by his self-confidence, and in response says that he doesn't even understand why he's looking for her. Riku says he wants to help Grace to see how important it is to her. The girl, although she agrees with the guy's request, points out to him that he should focus on finding Kadia. He reverently agrees and promises to fulfill it. Grace asks him to wait so she can get ready. Riku goes into his thoughts that he always found people's desires ugly, but Grace's desire seems charming to him. He notices that she took a sword with her, to which he asks her about it. The girl only replies that it is for the case that everything leads to a fight. Riku asks where she would like to go first. Grace says that they are going to Owen Gray's house in the theater, where Riku teleports them. The girl bursts into the house, kicking down the door, with complete confidence in her intentions. She notes in her thoughts that she had already thought about the not particularly large size of the theater itself. But Owen's room, in which he lives, does not seem so big. With apprehension and surprise in a bad way, Riku asks Grace about how she plans to cover her tracks after they come here, because it will be clear that they were here. Grace asks if he feels anything here or any traces of magic. Riku replies that there is something in that box. The guy takes out a photo frame with one photograph, which shocks both of them. Meanwhile, Kadia, tied up in a cold cellar, asks for someone to save her. She cannot believe in her kidnapping and is still in a state of shock. Kadia remembers waiting for Mr. Grain after the performance ended, and the girl remembers how someone's hands grabbed her and dragged her to this place. The girl, confused, asks herself where Mr. Grain is. Grace sees a portrait of Kadia with the Duchess, where Owen looks like the father in their family, but she doubts that there is anything more behind the feelings for the Duchess that she always knew about him. The girl says that now she doubts it. Riku replies that he is completely ignorant of the whole situation, but notes their similarities to a real family. Grace brings up the idea that the portrait might not have been painted when they were together. Riku asks why she decided that, and Grace says that Kadia can't stand blue clothes, and the Duchess doesn't wear beige. Grace asks him what would happen if they posed for a portrait that was painted recently in such clothes, since their tastes couldn't have changed so quickly, and Riku seriously thinks about it. The girl summarizes all the information that they are only sure that Owen loves the Duchess, but they don't know anything else for sure. Riku looks at the folder on the drawer, collecting his thoughts. The sheets of paper fall out of the guy's hands, along with the portrait, in response to which Grace asks him what happened. He answers her question with a question whether she remembers that he opened the box in the first place. The girl asks him if there is mana in this portrait. Riku replies that everything is exactly like that, and in his hands he holds secret documents that magicians use. Only the person who cast the spell can read them. Grace reminds him that he was certain that Owen was not a mage, and whether he sees a connection between this trace of magic and the one that was in their estate. Riku is confused by his thoughts that a non-mage could use magic, and it could be related to ancient magic. Grace asks if he can read what is written in these documents. Riku replies that even magicians cannot read them, and if they find out about it, they can execute the person. Grace says that then they will find other ways to find evidence. Riku is shocked that the girl won't force him to read this document, which irritates the girl that he thinks about her like that. The guy uses magic to read the document. Grace screams about what he's doing, worrying about him. Riku explains that this is an emergency, and the Duke will understand. The girl continues to worry about him, worrying that this will, on the contrary, put the guy in danger. He says that then she could talk to him, and he would think it over better. Grace replies that in such a risky situation, they shouldn't rely on vague hopes, and Riku replies that he won't punish him if she just asks. They read the document, and Grace asks him what it could mean. Grace considers the possibilities, going over the possible types of lilies that might be encrypted in the document, The girl suggests that it could be Duchess Liliet, suggesting that it could mean a place of secret meetings. Grace asks Riku if he thinks Owen is somehow involved, but the guy responds that they can't jump to such conclusions. The girl says that although they didn't find any evidence against him, they now know the meeting place. She approaches the servant standing at the gate of the estate. Grace pretends in front of him that she was invited by a noble gentleman. He tells her that she must have made a mistake, since no one had planned any social events today. The girl does not wait for the dialogue to continue and knocks out the servant at the gate with a blow to the jaw. Riku asks why she asked for the cloak since she was going to knock him out anyway, and she replies that she needed to hide her sword under the cloak. Grace suggests that they split up and search on different sides of the estate, with herself searching on the western side and Riku sent to the eastern side. He does not agree and reminds her to be careful, because there is a high chance that they will meet people. Grace, wiping the blood from her face, asks herself where so many people are coming from. Another stranger tries to attack her, screaming and drawing his sword. The girl throws down her cloak and rushes towards him, revealing her weapon in response. She looks with contempt at the stranger, who didn't even have a chance to do anything. The stranger, with his last breath, says that this is precisely why the master needs her, in response to which Grace only becomes perplexed. The girl is surprised that he knows her name, but does not understand what he meant. She notices that there is an inscription under the portrait of Wilhelm Matzau. Grace puts forward a new hypothesis that it may not be Manaska who is behind this, but Libertan. She wipes away the blood and decides to deal with it once she finds Katia. Riku walks through the estate through a mountain of people lying on the floor, saying that they are the only ones he sees, unlike the owner. The door creaked as the guy entered the room. Owen sat tied up with his mouth covered, and immediately began actively asking for help. Riku approaches him warily. The guy helps the hostage to free himself. Riku notes to himself that Owen could be a human artifact created by ancient magic. He asks Riku if he knows where Katia is now, but the guy ignores everything, continuing the thought that Owen was turned into an artifact, and who will die if he does not obey. Riku says that the Wingaston Knights and Grace herself are already actively searching for the missing girl, and very soon they themselves will be here. Owen only said that everything was now clear to him, and Riku became sure that he was the one responsible for the kidnapping of Katia. The unknown man in the cloak says that he can't even believe that they want to save the life of such a fool, turning to Katia, who can't even believe what she heard. The stranger orders her to eat, because for now she is of some use, but when this ends she will accept her fate of dying and then tells her to shut up. In another voice, words are heard that the girl is interested in how they will use this benefit. Katia screams terribly from the sounds of blows and turns her head to the side. Through her tears, she still decides to look at what happened there that brought her to this state. She notices in front of her a very confident and undoubting Grace, who came here to save her sister, despite all their misunderstandings. Grace frees Katia and asks her where the rest of the kidnapped people are, and she replies that Mr. Grain was also kidnapped. The girl notes to herself that Owen's presence here is very suspicious, but first they need to get out of here. Riku looks at Grace in fear, who is almost covered in blood but does not look any more tired. The girl asks him why he looks so clean. Riku asks right there and then, forgetting to answer the girl's question, whether she is injured and what happened during their separation. She replies that she will pay for the mantle later and that she had to sacrifice it herself. Riku replies that it doesn't matter at all, and asks again if she got hurt. Grace replies that it's not her blood. Riku says that he also found only one Owen, and then they realize to Grace that it was Mr. Grain who kidnapped her. Katia immediately sees that Owen was saved and immediately turns to him, glad that she was able to see him again. Owen also expresses his joy and calls the girl simply by her first name, forgetting about all the rules of etiquette. Grace tells him to be respectful of Katia and to address her as Lady Katia. The man explains that the Katia is still like his own daughter to him. Grace asks how he dares to call the lady of the house of Winostin his daughter, and how he has the courage to do so. Someone is walking through the estate, and this is indicated by the steps that can already be heard very clearly. Grace says that these must already be knights from their house. Owen asks if the Duke will be there, to which Grace replies that for him he is his Grace, and especially since there is nothing wrong with a father coming to save her daughter. The man asks ironically what she said, that Katia is the Duke's daughter. He asks her if she will become her daughter if he kills the Duke, which greatly frightens Katia herself, whom he covers with his hand and takes Grace behind his back. Grace notes that this is very similar to Ionella's magic. Riku shields the two girls and says that they need to be careful, because there is a living artifact in front of them, and Grace asks how this is even possible. Owen, in a fit of hysterics, screams that he can take care of Malena better than the Duke, who could not stay with her, calling him a bastard for this vile act. Grace says he sounds too serious for someone who just wants to play family. Riku promises that he will do everything, But this madman will not dare to touch her with a finger, which surprises Grace very much. But she is not irritated, but rather awkwardly embarrassed. The Duke bursts into the room calling for his daughter, whom he had been searching for with all his might. Owen screams at the Duke with obvious, unending anger. Riku exchanges a look with Grace, and they both realize they are ready to attack Owen. The girl throws her sword at Owen, aiming near his heart. Riku uses magic to disable him. The man falls, losing even control of his legs. Grace remembers Rick's words about making sure Owen never lays a finger on her and smiles. The girl admits that she had never heard anything more banal, but now it wasn't so bad. The Duke screams, very happy that his daughter is alive and he was able to find her. Kadi is very happy to see the Duke and also shouts to him. Grace asks if they should seal his magic while Owen is taken away by knights while Kadia hugs her father. Riku replies that there is no need for that, as he has already destroyed the artifact. But the guy clarifies that Owen's mana has been neutralized, but he could still have other artifacts left. A terrible explosion occurs, which covers a very large radius. Riku protects Grace from it, covering her with his magic. Riku creates a shield using magical powers, but they are cramped due to the huge radius of the explosions. Riku says that they definitely need to get out of here because someone has cast an ancient spell. Grace asks him if he's okay, and the guy replies that he's okay. The girl asks him again if he is sure about this, to which Riku coughs in pain. Grace admits that the spell was quite strong, and then says that she will not forget his actions. Grace says that Owen was a key figure in this operation. Owen himself leaves with the knights. The Duchess arrived to see everyone and meets her daughter, who is no less happy about their new meeting. Owen shouts after her that the Duke doesn't love Milena, which frightens everyone. The Duke orders him to be taken away as quickly as possible. Owen screams that the Duke does not deserve Milena's love and he has no right to love her. The Duchess doesn't understand what he's talking about, and they're just friends. Owen screams that he cared for her when she was entertaining the nobles, and now she turns her back on him. The Duchess says she thought it was money from the committee. Owen shouts that no committee will donate 100,000 herons to them, and she shouldn't pretend that she didn't know where he got that kind of money from. Grace is shocked that a noble house would spend 100,000 heronies to spend them. The Duke grabs Owen by the collar, who is shocked by such a sharp swing. He orders him to be taken away and asks how he dares to make such impudent announcements. Grace suggests going back to the palace because the guy still needs to be patched up. Riku thinks that their investigation will progress, which means he won't have to return to Libertas for a while. And this means that he will be able to see her, which makes him happy. Riku says that Owen had to be escorted to the palace because he used ancient magic. The girl says that they were never able to find the rest of the missing, but this could mean that Owen was used as an artifact, and Duke Liberton could be behind this. Grace says she found a portrait of William I in his estate, and underneath it was a strange inscription that said, "Glory to the Liberton family and glory to King Libert." Riku immediately starts to tremble, and his gaze suddenly becomes empty. He says he'll look into it and thanks her for the information, but in his mind he says this is not what he expected at all. The princess says that Owen's behavior does not resemble that of an experimental human artifact, as if he did not have to be forced. Grace says that the lily garden in the estate is too big and extravagant for a commoner, and besides, there were mercenaries there. When Grace says that it would have to be someone incredibly brave to order the kidnapping, the princess replies that the Manaskas could have been involved. The princess confirms that they could have conducted an investigation, and Owen called himself a mage from birth, and after his death they had no leads related to Manaska. Grace simply remains silent in response to the entire summary that the princess summarized. She tells the princess about the inscription under the portrait of Wilhelm Monnen in the lily garden, which seemed suspicious to her. The princess asks about what is said in the inscription under the portrait. Grace says that it said glory to the Liberton family, glory to King Liberta, reminding him that he always kept his distance from the imperial family and all high society. The princess asks if Riku knows about this. Grace says that she has already managed to tell him everything. The princess asks how he reacted, and when she found out that now the Winostons are also involved in this matter after the kidnapping of Lady Kadia. Grace says they can't know for sure whether Manaska kidnapped Kadia or whether Owen decided to kidnap her himself, but she remembers how the mercenary called her by name, which was strange. The princess asks what she would do in this situation. Grace says that she would investigate to find out everything she could and then catch Manaska red-handed without giving them a reason to retaliate. The princess says that she trusts Lady Grace, but she must show wisdom and caution. Grace walks away from the princess and thinks about why she mentioned Rika when she mentioned Liberton. She is surprised and meets someone's gaze, which is what they feel. The girl asks how Riku's wounds are. He replies that his wounds are already fine. Grace looks at him carefully, and Riku asks what's wrong. Grace asks why he is so determined to protect her at the estate. Riku tells her that she inspired her a lot when she said that she wanted to protect everything that she had achieved for many years, and Grace told him not to do something like that because he could get hurt. Riku says that there was very little interesting in his life, but now his life will be much more exciting if he is with her. Grace asks him what he's talking about, and a slight blush appears on her cheeks. She tells him to stop fooling around, and she will pay for the treatment of his injuries as soon as she can. Riku smiles with all his joy and is satisfied with her answer. Grace walks up the stairs of her estate. She meets her sister and asks why she doesn't say something if there is something to talk about. Grace looks at Kadia warily, waiting for at least some kind of intelligible answer. Kadia hesitantly says that she has thoughts of asking Grace something. She asks her sister why she came to save her. Grace tells her with casual ease that she saved her because she is Kadia Winoston. Kadia asks if that is the only reason Grace saved her, sacrificing so much and putting herself at such risk. Grace says that this is actually a very good reason why she went to save her. Because protecting everyone is what being the head of the family means, to which the Kadia only responds with absurd silence. Grace is about to leave, but Kadia immediately asks her to wait for her. Kadia admits that she really did want to make her look bad, so she thanks her for saving her, admits her mistakes towards her sister, and accepts her offer. Grace happily tells her that Linda will contact the Academy and the Institute of Arts, and Kadia must master court etiquette within a month. The girl also tells her sister to choose the best outfits, so that others can create their wardrobes based on her, and when she is around, she calls Grace sister. Kadia agrees to everything, and Grace says that she can't wait for the start of a new relationship between them. Grace thinks that now there will be much less problems in the family, but all that remains is to sort out the Manaska house and the matter related to her mother. A mysterious man comes to Owen, and the prisoner immediately looks up at him, surprised by the unexpected meeting. Owen calls him my lord, immediately throwing himself at his mercy. He tells him that the lady gave the order. She will give him what he wants if he tells where the rest of the missing are. The man asks the prisoner Owen if he understood everything. Riku asks again if Leon just said that Owen confessed to everything. Leon says that Owen confessed to killing Zack and revealed the location where all the other missing people are now located. Leon says that they are being held in the dukedom of Libertas, and Riku asks if that is the crown princess. Leon replies that he saw her return to the audience chamber after interrogating Owen, and she gave the order to return the people to the capital as quickly as possible. Riku asks him if he thinks she suspects Libertan of this. Riku says that anything out of line now could lead to rumors and suspicions, and his visit to the capital only makes things worse. Leon screams that this is unfair and that the crown has no reason to suspect him. Riku asks if he is saying this on behalf of Archduke Libertan, mocking him with sarcasm, and Leon apologizes and simply says that he thinks it is unfair to suspect him of this. The guy orders Leon to send a message to Libertas and tell them to find all the missing and bring them here, and he can return soon. The servant says that the crown princess went hunting with the emperor, and Grace notes that she went to meet the empress alone. Grace asks me to tell her that she came as soon as the princess returns. The girl suddenly meets someone she would not like to see. The Duchess of Manaska herself appears before her eyes. She greets her with a smile, politely calling her Grace Winosteen. Grace says she didn't expect to see her here. Duchess Manaska explains that she came to the palace to ask for an audience with the princess, but was told that the princess was in the crown princess's residence, while Grace says that she is hunting with the emperor. The Duchess of Manaska concludes that now is not the best time to visit, and asks if she knows why everyone has become so busy in the palace. Grace says it's a trifle and not worth paying attention to. The Duchess of Manaska says she thought that Grace might also be busy with these matters, but she replied that as a member of the Imperial Guard, she was already involved in ensuring security. She replies that now everything has become a little clearer to her, but she is forced to visit the palace another time. Grace asks if it's urgent, to which the Duchess of Manaska replies that it's not at all. The woman says she just needed to make sure of something. Grace smiles and shares her hopes that the Duchess of Monastir will be able to do so in the near future. Grace remembers that Rick said that Owen confessed to all the crimes. She puts forward in her own assumptions that he could have done this because of the order of the Duchess of Manaska. Grace greets the Empress solemnly, but she orders her to stand up. The girl is sure that something is going on since she was given an audience. The Empress reminds her that they last saw each other before her exile. The Empress apologizes to him not for how many tasks she entrusted him with, but for too many tasks. Grace says it's not a job, but her duty as a member of the Winoston family. The servant says that Riku also came here, which surprises Grace. Riku asks if the Empress was looking for him. The Empress says that now everyone is gathered and they can begin to discuss the general agenda. She says that she had already heard about the missing people, that they were found in the Duchy of Libère, and that there was an inscription in the estate pointing to Libertin. The woman doesn't think Libertin is planning a rebellion, but since they have serious evidence, They must find out the reason for the sake of everyone involved. The Empress shares her wish for Grace to investigate the matter together with the magician Riku. Grace asks if Libertan would mind her interfering with the investigation because of her service. The Empress tells her that he won't mind if he wants to prove his innocence, especially since he is not in the duchy now, and it will be more convenient for Grace and Riku to continue the investigation. Riku asks if he can refuse, which surprises Grace greatly. The Empress says they cannot refuse, so they should go to Libertas. The woman orders Rick to make sure Grace has everything she needs and wishes them luck. Grace and Riku bow their heads and promise to carry out the order. Leon greets Riku, who turns to him for new instructions. Riku orders him to send word that he is not returning to the duchy alone, and to make sure that everything is prepared for the guest at a level worthy of his status and reputation. Leon asks if Riku will tell about himself, to which he replies that since the Empress does not want it, he has no choice, and then adds that it will be very interesting for him. Grace and Riku are transported again by wind magic, and there is a crowd of servants around them. Riku respectfully calls her Lady Grace, asking if she is okay, but the girl replies that she is sick from the dust, and all the servants are stunned that Riku is so polite to someone. He apologizes to her and says that next time he will be much more careful. Grace removes the hood of her robe and sarcastically asks where her manners are, so as not to hide her identity and show who has come to visit them. The head maid of the Libertan estate, Samantha, introduces herself and greets Grace, saying that she has been ordered to assist the guest in every way. Grace asks to convey her gratitude to the Duke. Samantha promises that she will, and offers to show her to the room. They enter a luxurious room that is all sparkling with happiness, and the furniture and interior are decorated with gold ornaments. Grace points out that this is not a guest room, and head maid Samantha tells her that it is, and that the room is currently used to receive the most important guests. Riku says that the room looks quite good, and Samantha gets nervous and wonders in her mind why he didn't say so right away, when she could have shown the room right away. Grace asks where Riku will be staying. The smiling head maid Samantha tells her that the guy will live opposite, and Grace asks to thank the Archduke for his work, and she also needs a person who will carry out her orders. Grace bluntly asks her partner in the investigation if he is hiding something from her. Riku asks what she means, and Grace replies that she just thought that he might be keeping secrets from her, and in her mind she remembers how the head maid's reaction changed so quickly from Riku's words. He tells her that he is not hiding anything, but the girl shares a revelation in response that she only gives people 3 chances. The guy just thinks about what was said and goes into his thoughts. Grace says he's already used 2 of them and he should be careful not to do anything she might regret. Riku says that everything is clear to him and asks when the girl will start the investigation. The girl tells him that she is going to start tomorrow morning, and Riku says goodbye to her, wishing her good night and saying that they will see each other tomorrow. Riku notes that Grace is very attentive, but even if he tells the truth, the girl will be against him. Riku puts the robe on Grace, and the girl asks if he is using it on purpose under the pretext of getting closer, and therefore continues to put it on her. Riku tells her to get used to everyone serving her, and Grace asks why he's acting like this. Riku says that he is a gentleman and asks her to let him court her, calling her Lady Grace. Grace doesn't think she understands what's going on at all. The girl wonders if Rick might like her, but he always acts as if she's just a nuisance to him and is always sarcastic. She looks at Riku, remembering how he stopped being rude and became more open, promising to protect her and be on her side. Grace finds this very interesting. The girl says that it is not surprising that in a room that was completely white and unconscious people were kidnapped. Everyone thought that they were dead, and asks if Riku feels traces of magic. The guy replies that he doesn't feel anything, but clarifies that they are in an ordinary room and no one lives here. Grace decides to open a rather large white door. It was as if snow was falling on her from the room. The girl immediately closes it, which surprises Riku very much, who asks what happened. She asks him if he saw what was behind the door, and the guy tells her that he didn't see anything. Grace is silent and does not dare to say anything, and collects her thoughts. In her head, she only has a picture of a snowy cliff. Grace asks the guy if it could have been a hallucination. Riku says that she has snowflakes on her shoulders, meaning that this hallucination can create real objects, and Grace says that there is currently only one place on the continent where it snows. Grace says that it is only in Windsor County that it is snowing now, and that is where the Crown Princess's fiancé lives. Riku asks if it could be a teleportation spell. Grace asks him about it again, clarifying so that she can fully believe what she heard. The guy explains to her that this is one of the ancient spells, which people called a labyrinth, which connects 2 spaces, through which even those who do not have mana can move. Grace clarifies that he was talking about the fact that he said that he doesn't feel any traces of ancient magic here. Riku suggests that the entire mansion has been turned into an artifact, and therefore it will be impossible to detect magic here if the spell is inactive, and Grace asks if this is possible. He replies that this could be possible, since even a human could be used to create an artifact. Grace says she doesn't see the point in anyone needing it, and Riku suggests that they want to challenge the Empress. The girl calls this a serious problem and tells the guy to imagine what could happen if this door led to the residence of Her Majesty, and all the skilled magicians began to flock to the palace. Riku says that fortunately, this would be very, very difficult to pull off. The labyrinth is a very ancient and complex spell, because if something goes wrong, the magician may find himself trapped in a rift in space and never return. Riku says that such powerful spells require a huge amount of mana, and Manask doesn't have that much. Grace suggests that Libertan may be involved. Riku tries to say something in response, but in his thoughts there is only one thing: he cannot intervene now and tell her about everything. They see a portrait of Wilhelmon on the wall. The guy says with disdain that they don't even try to hide it. Grace asks if he told her where the hostages were being held when Owen confessed to his crime. Riku tells her that Owen wasn't that generous when he told her everything, and now the entire mansion is being searched in the hopes of finding evidence. Riku remembers that his mages didn't tell him about the painting, which means someone hung it up later, probably to frame Libertan. Grace asks menacingly how they dare try to turn them against themselves. The girl orders him to follow her, and the guy asks where they are going. Grace says they were trapped in the Manaska house the moment they stepped foot in Owen's house, and Libertan has nothing to do with it. Riku silently thinks over everything the girl said. The girl says that they are leaving already, and why the guy is standing here, and after that, Riku agrees to leave. Riku asks the girl if she found any evidence, and the girl tells him that she found out that it was the Libertan magicians who returned the missing to the Empire. Grace asks Riku if the Libertan mages would have left a portrait of Wilhelm I if they had seen him there. Riku counters by saying that this, at the same time, does not speak of their similar innocence. The guy reminds that everything is working out too well, that Kadia ended up in the house that was listed in the address, and Grace tells him that they wouldn't write down important data. He continues to defend his position and view of the situation, that this does not fully prove that all the evidence was planned and the clues were planted. Grace recalls that there was only one person guarding the gate that day. She remembers that Owen was also captured too quickly, which was too fortunate a coincidence. Riku after Grace said that Manaska might want to install Libert and what they are trying to achieve by doing so. Grace recalls that he spoke of their inability to use the powers of the labyrinth and suggests that the former Duke of Libertan may help them. Riku asks her again if she means to say that the Manaska are trying to make the Archduke follow their orders. Grace says she shouldn't have said that, but he better be aware of that information. The Empress ascended to her throne after getting rid of her brothers and sisters. Riku understands that some very powerful magician must be working for the Empress, capable of detecting traces of magic. But Grace also has a theory that they made it look too good for her to stop suspecting Libertan. But still, the Empress can't be allowed to doubt the Archduke. The girl distributes responsibilities so that Riku learns how to destroy this labyrinth, and she will report this to the Empress. The guy agrees to this, and the girl asks if he will then really be able to destroy this labyrinth. Riku replies that he can, because it's all just a matter of the connection between spaces. That is, it's enough to just divide this tunnel into two parts, and asks Grace to come over. Riku says that it is very dangerous, so she better stay close to him so that nothing bad happens. And Grace remains silent in response. The girl approaches him and Riku breaks into a smile. The guy uses magic and casts a spell. Grace asks what that sound is, and the guy tells her that it's a spell, and the mansion is returning to its original appearance. Riku says that they need to get rid of what the labyrinth hides, and the girl impatiently asks when they will be able to see where the labyrinth leads. The guy asks permission to remove the camouflage from other areas as well. He opens the nearest door, and what's there surprises them both. Riku asks if this is the Winostin estate. Grace replies that they simply don't have such rooms in the estate, but the guy starts saying that she reminds him very much of something. The girl says that this room is very similar to her room. She asks herself more about how this photograph that she saw could have ended up here. This photo in her hands belongs to her mother. It is of Grace with her mother. Grace remembers her mother telling her to get up over and over again. The girl's mother told her that she would not be able to handle the responsibility of running the house if she could not even hold a wooden sword. She told her daughter not to forget that she was the heir to the House of Winostin. Grace is confused that the maze leads here. The girl is sure that her mother would have arranged her room this way, and this portrait in her hands was her favorite. Grace comes to the conclusion that this room could indeed be her mother's room. She turns to Rick, and he is already ready to listen to all her suggestions. The girl asks if it will be possible to connect someplace to the labyrinth without being in it. Riku understands that this is definitely not a good sign, but still honestly says that it is unlikely that anyone could do this. Grace tries her best to keep the thought that she could always be wrong about her mother at bay, but it all might not mean anything. Grace says that first they need to find out where the mansion is, but there is worry in her voice, and Riku asks if everything is okay with her. The girl says that first they need to look around, and then she asks what the guy is talking about. Riku replies that he was asking specifically about her. The girl asks if he really wants to talk about this right now. The guy replies that he really wants to talk about it, because Grace might need support right now. The girl asks him not to worry about it and just focus on finding evidence. They switch their focus back to their investigation. Riku suggests leaving this room first. The guy says that they need to return to the Duke's estate. The girl asks if he has found out where the room itself is. Riku replies that it is in the southeast of the Adelaide Empire, but he cannot say for sure. Grace remembers that the Marquisate of Izelt is located there, and her mother's room too, but when she wrote there, no one answered her, and Riku says that it takes a lot of mana to destroy the labyrinth. Grace tries to recover from a sudden panic attack caused by memories of her mother and new doubts. Riku says that he has used up a lot of mana, and now he will need to restore his strength, and asks Grace's permission to rest. Leon asks Riku if everything was okay in the subway in that mansion. Riku asks his assistant to tell him about the Izelt house. The guy asks about their acquaintance with the Manhwa house, but Leon says that it is very unlikely that the two houses are familiar. After hearing that the Iselts are closer to the Winstons, Riku is surprised and begins to remember her image in his head. The boy's thoughts were filled with memories of how shocked and scared Grace was. Riku orders him to find out if House Manhwa had anything in common with House Iselt over the past few years. Leon says he will do it, and then a knock is heard. The maid says it's about Lady Grace, and Riku is very surprised. Grace was waiting for him in a beautiful white dress, looking at the stars and the moon. There are still doubts in her head because she trusted her mother very much. She hears a reproach that the one who forbade sitting on the balcony is doing it herself, and the girl immediately turns around to look at the one who said it. Riku walks towards her, the sound of his boots tapping loudly. Grace asks if he was taught to knock. The guy tells her that he was the one who knocked, and also that he heard that she was having wine instead of dinner. Grace says she doesn't plan on getting blackout drunk, and Riku tells her he noticed. The guy asks why she is drinking alone on the balcony on such a cold night, but Grace says that she enjoyed the recognition from the Imperial family, and that is why she was glad that she is Winoston. Riku asks why this confession is so important to her, and the girl replies that it means that she is completely irreplaceable. Grace says that it was her mother who taught her everything, and all the recognition and trust of the Imperial family is the result of her mother's work for her. That's why she admires her. Her mother was the one who instilled in her the concept of Winoston, which gave her strength, and it would be a terrible irony if she worked against the Winostons. Riku replies that even if that is the case, she has every right to be the heir. Grace shared that everyone either suggested that she give up her status as heiress, as this would solve all her troubles, and everyone else simply bowed down to her. Riku says that they are all just hypocrites, that they do not see Grace's true attitude towards her family and how much she values it, and that everyone was just trying to exploit her weaknesses. The girl says that no one took her seriously to whom she told this, and everyone simply said that she was imagining problems for herself, and Riku is the first who does not think so. Riku says he only knows her for a short time, but even he can tell she wouldn't worry about such trivial things. Moreover, he believes that one day she will cope with this. The guy suggests going back into the room because of the cold, and then asks her permission, holding the shoe in his hand. Grace asks if it would be more romantic if he just put the shoes on her, and the guy tells her that she doesn't mind. He puts her shoes on, standing more comfortably, leaning on one knee. Grace asks if he has any feelings for her, and then walks away and tells him to forget about it. Riku tells her that they do exist. The guy says he really does have feelings for her, affectionately calling him Lady Grace. He asks if she will punish him for this, but the girl replies that she does not want that now. Riku is very surprised by this, and a slight blush appears on his cheeks. The guy says that she should rest, and tomorrow she will have to continue the investigation and report to Her Majesty. Riku asks if she's really going to tell Her Majesty that her mother might be in cahoots with Manhwa, and she tells her that she needs to know. He tells her that he can lie and say that he didn't see anything, and that there was no room connected to Grace's mother. Grace asks if he likes her so much that he is willing to lie about her. She says that it's not worth it anyway, and asks to connect him with the princess. The girl tells the princess everything with the help of magic. The princess asks what about Grace's mother and if House Izelt is involved. Grace says it's very likely. The princess says that she will not tell about her mother. She explains this by the fact that she herself is confident in her mother's loyalty and innocence. The princess says to take care of yourself and investigate this matter as much as possible, and she will present the case in such a way that Grace's mother is not accused. Grace looks very happy, and Riku notices it right away. The guy wants her to smile in her mind when she talks to him. Duchess Manaska says that she did not think that Archduke Liebert would be on the Empress's side. Ionel Manaska says it's all because of that little brat Grace. Duchess Manaska tells her to shut up and asks the reason for her visit to the Winoston house, calling the demonic monster as stupid as her daughter herself. She tells her younger son that she ordered him to make sure that his older sister didn't do anything stupid, and he repents to her. The Duchess says that without his sister he is nobody, and will not take the throne if something happens to her. And since everything turned out this way, then let him turn to the king, saying that the show is beginning. Grace says that when she returns to the capital, she will have a lot to do, and she also needs to contact Manaska. The girl says that Riku has only one chance, and she will watch how he uses it. Riku blushes again at her words. The guy asks her if she is the one. The girl replies that this is exactly what it is about. Riku says he'll take it as his promise, and Grace thinks he's really cute. The maids say it was an honor to serve Lady Grace. Grace asks that you convey to the Archduke her deep gratitude for all his kindness. The girl asks her people how they are doing, and the servants greet her joyfully and are glad to see her back. Grace asks Elena to write to the Iselt to state that she will be coming on an official visit. The girl tells her to convey that she is going to meet the one they are hiding, and to add that if she refuses, she will force her to do it. Riku comes to seek an audience with Her Majesty. The servant shouts that this is absurd, but he does not understand that he should have received an official request. Riku says he's placing an order right now. Another servant says the boy can pass. Riku addresses her with respect and walks towards the Empress. The Empress says that she was told that they found traces of ancient magic in the Duchy of Liebert. Riku asks to let her destroy Manaska so that he can prove that they were studying ancient magic. The Empress answers her that she is quite surprised, because the Manaska are her loyal subjects, of whom she is proud, and why should she unite against them in order to destroy them? The guy tells her that she made Grace stay around all the time to keep an eye on him, so she should know that he has nothing to do with this case. The Empress says that no one hoped for his innocence as much as she did. Riku says that the innocent Archduke Libertan offers her his help, revealing his true status. The Empress asks him if he is helping her, and Riku replies that he is doing it for Libertan. The Empress thinks everything over in her head. Riku guesses that she doesn't trust him. The Empress says that she will discuss this with the Crown Princess, and after this conversation, she will make a decision. Riku adds that he will soon tell her who he really is. The Empress says that she has no say in this matter, specifically calling him Archduke. Riku says he will give her time, but he can't wait too long. The Empress involuntarily smiles back at him. The guy bows low and says he hopes she will make a wise decision. The Empress signs the paper with a characteristic click of the pen. Riku is sitting on the windowsill again with a languid look. The sad guy's face immediately changes and a smile appears on his face. He is glad that Grace came. The girl also smiles at him and asks if he is so happy to see her. She says that she has come for an audience, so she invites him to take a walk with her in the city. Riku becomes very embarrassed and his cheeks turn red again. Grace reminds him that she never bought him a new robe, and Riku seems euphoric, thinking that this is a chance to go on a date with him. Riku asks her why she made him try on each of them, since she then bought all the robes. Grace tells him that she bought them because they all look great on him and asks if she doesn't owe him anything else. Riku says there's still one debt left for saving Owen's house. He asks if he can invite him to a wonderful restaurant. Grace and Riku walk together while everyone around them does nothing but talk about them, creating rumors. Everyone notices and recognizes Grace, but they don't know who the guy next to her is. The Duke yells at her to explain everything that happened and what her excuse is, showing a sign with a photo of Grace and Rick. Grace asks if he really thinks this whole article is true. The Duke says it doesn't matter, because it wouldn't have happened if she had been more careful. Grace says that he will never change since he doesn't care about the truth, and says that it's not so bad that she is seen with a commoner. A scream can even be heard from the corridor, and this frightens Kadia, who was standing with her mother in the corridor. Grace says that this is not her lover, but even if he were, no one has the right to judge her choice. The Duke begins to tremble, and he asks her irritably how she dares to do such a thing. Grace says that now in her hands is both power over the house and the lives of the two girls she loves most, and the Duke again says how dare he threaten her. He tells his own daughter that it would have been better not to raise her like that, and not to have allowed her to be born at all, saying that it would have been better for her not to have been born. Riku says that he can't take it anymore, and Grace and the Duke turn around to look at the one who said such harsh words. The Duke shouts that he has no place here, and that he is just an ordinary commoner. Riku says that no one is born by mistake because it takes the desire of both. Grace asks what secret he was keeping from her. He immediately remembers that she only gives people 3 chances. The girl tells him to tell his secret to decide whether to turn this gossip into real news or not. Riku says that the name he uses now is just a nickname he was called as a child. The girl asks who he is then, and Riku kneels in front of her and says that he is Reinkel Liberton, saying that she can call him whatever she wants. The Duke is in great shock, as is his daughter. The guy asks if she will punish him for this. She tells him to follow her and brings him to her room to talk about everything in person. She says she will give him a choice of how she will answer him, as the heiress or as Grace Winoston. Reinkel says he would have preferred the outcome in which she responded as Grace Winnestein. Grace furiously yells at him, sarcastically asking him if he liked what she was saying about the Archduke all this time. The girl says that she hates liars, but decided to trust him, even if he is hiding something, and asks him to tell the reason why he hid his status, and it would be better for him to give a worthy reason. He tries to calm her down somehow. Reinkel says that the Empress told him to keep it a secret, but he himself understands that he should have told the truth. But the guy himself decided not to do this, so that she would not begin to suspect him of it. The girl admits to herself that for the first time she felt comfortable with someone after what he told her that night. Alice enters the room but is asked to leave, as now is not the time. Grace asks Reinkel why he saved her at Owen's estate. She asks him if he still refers to her as Grace Winoston. Reinkel tells her that nothing has changed, and that she treats her the same way she always did. She sincerely says that her attitude towards him will not change, and she will communicate with him as before, reminding him of his lies, until she herself feels better. Reinkel says what it means. Grace tells her that he himself said that he was bored, but now everything will become much more interesting. After this, they shake hands with each other. Reinkel admits his own words and shares his joy that she decided to punish him, while Grace's hand reaches for his face, which he presses against it. Grace tells him to behave well, since she is giving him another chance, and the girl and the boy kiss each other. Reinkel lowers his head to reach Grace's lips, and Reinkel promises that he will. Grace smiles and asks if the guy just arrived. Reinkel asks if the girl is busy. The girl says that she looked at the list of those who spread rumors about them, and Alice hands over a letter for Grace, which has her mother's handwriting on it, and the letter itself contains an order not to come to Iselt. Grace is sure that something needs to be thought up, but without the trip to that estate itself. Reinkel suggests talking to the Iselts at the party itself. Reinkel asks how she has never met her mother's family, to which Grace simply remains silent. Grace admits it sounds strange, but she will ask the Empress to ask them to come to the party. She turns to Alina, who bowed her head to carry out the new order. Grace orders her to find out about the man who is courting Ionel Manaska. Ionel Manaska screams that he hates this disgusting piece of crap. Ionel gets irritated and shouts why her younger brother Tristan brought her a threatening letter from Grace. Ionel says that she wants to cut off Grace's head and bring it to her mother so that she might give her another chance. The girl asks about the king's readiness. She immediately begins to glow with happiness when she learns that the king is ready, already beginning to dream of how her mother will recognize her. Grace looks languidly at the pink sunset. Reinkel asks if she is nervous by any chance. She immediately comes out of her train of thought and looks at him. The guy says that everything will be fine, holding out his hand to her. They walk together, and Grace holds Reinkel's hand. It's like everyone goes crazy and starts discussing them. Some of the public ask if the rumors about them are true. Grace whispers into Reinkel's ear so that he would at least imagine their faces for a moment when they find out about him. The guy replies that only her reputation and honor are important to him. The Duchess of Manaska arrives with her children, greeting Lady Grace. Grace greets her back, smiling at her. The Duchess of Manaska advises not to show your true feelings completely, because usually the one who opens up completely ends up losing. Grace asks the older woman if she is speaking from experience, and the Duchess of Manaska tells her that she is even partly right. Reinkel says why beat around the bush, and why can't she talk normally? The Duchess of Manaska says it's time for her to go and says goodbye to Grace. Reinkel disputes Grace's assumption that the Duchess of Manaska has guessed who he is. Grace says that someone could have recommended it to him, but since it was Duchess Manaska, she wouldn't even listen. But this could mean that someone from the imperial family could be working with Manaska. Grace says she wants to discuss this with the Empress personally. The stranger says he is glad to meet Miss Grace, and she asks him who it is. The man introduces himself as Peter Iselt, who is the heir of Marquis Iselt, and her mother is his aunt, so it is a great honor for him to meet her. Grace asks why he calls her Miss Grace then, since he knows it's wrong. The girl says that she has never seen her uncle, but now she is sure that she has no manners. Peter Iselt says his father always thought of her as Miss Grace, not as the Winoston heiress. Grace yells at him that the Marquis does not raise children, and teaches his children not to respect others and to say all sorts of stupid things, and she herself reminds him that she does not show mercy to relatives, only those of common blood. Peter Isolt asks if she really thinks that the Weinstein house belongs to her. Grace says that for even one more word she will order his tongue to be torn out. Reinkel casts only one cold glance at Peter Isolt. Peter Isolt immediately says that he forgot about his manners because he was so happy to see her. Grace says it's surprising that he even remembered her name, and the Isolt family hasn't been seen anywhere for a long time, and she wants to know the reason for this. Peter Isolt says that they were not invited and leaves, and Grace only says before that now they have the opportunity to make up for lost time. Reinkel says that Peter Isolt may be a human artifact since he sensed his mana. Grace remains silent and decides to think it all over again. The girl tells Reinkel that her mother could have forbidden her to visit the Marquis in order to protect her. Reinkel says that they can't know for sure whether the heir of House Isolt is a human artifact, so they better focus on how to deal with Manhwa for now. Grace begins to consider the options of who she could go to for help in order to forbid contact with the Isolt house, and comes to only one candidate. The servants begin a ceremonial greeting to the Empress and her family. Grace and Reinkel notice that Prince Isis is here too. But His Highness never leaves the academy as he is too busy researching magic. The princess thanks everyone for coming to the engagement party, and she is glad that all her friends and beloved vassals have come, and she is glad that Grace Winston is here. All the guests make a noise when Grace says that she and Archduke Libertan are honored to be here, and the audience no longer considers Rika a commoner. Reinkel notices that there is not a drop of surprise on the Duchess of Manhwa's face, which means she knew who he was. The Empress smiles at her very happily. Reinkel respectfully decides to ask if the Empress knows why no one from the Isolt house attended the imperial parties. The Empress asks ironically if he wants to impress the rest of Grace's family, but he replies that they simply stayed away from her and her family. Grace recalls that the heir of House Isolt said that they were simply not invited. The girl says that she dares not detain them any longer, and the Empress says that they can go and enjoy the party together. Ionel Manhwa is very surprised by something. She begins to look around sharply as if trying to find some kind of victim. Grace asks why she is acting like this, and Reinkel replies that he, as Libertan, from whom all other families descend, can easily block someone else's power. The guy says that Ionel won't be able to use spells other than ancient magic, and all they have to do is force her to do it. Grace asks him why it's become so noisy outside, distracted from their conversation. The glass in the estate breaks sharply and very loudly, and Reinkel shouts at the girl to take care of herself. The boy uses magic to protect Grace from flying shards of broken glass. An aggressive wild wolf with glowing red eyes appears out of nowhere in the house. The guests shout for everyone to run and clean up as quickly as possible. The Duke shouts that things are only getting worse outside the palace walls, and then orders the knights to protect the imperial family. Grace calls Reinkel's attention, addressing him as Riku out of habit, due to the unexpectedness and extreme situation. She says that Ionel Manhwa has already left the banquet hall, and all this could have been planned. Grace and Reinkel run together to find Ionel Manhwa and stop him. They notice a whole flock of demonic monsters in front of them. Grace says that she never expected to see so many demonic creatures right in the imperial palace, drawing her sword in preparation for battle. Grace and Reinkel use their powers together to fight off demonic monsters. Grace asks how they will prove Ionela's guilt, and Reinkel says that she needs to piss Ionela off now, and he already has a plan. They burst into the room with the characteristic bang of an open door, which crunched under the enormous force of the blow. Ionel Manhwa is shocked that someone broke into her home so unceremoniously. Grace greets Ionel Manhwa. The girl looks at her with contempt, and her gaze becomes sharp. Reinkel says that as a magician, he has every right to execute her right now because she used ancient magic. Ionel Manhwa shouts at him that she has no way of knowing about such things, and Reinkel has no right to have such a conversation with her. Grace says that her mother took on the task of dealing with the demonic entities, and they had time to talk, and Ionel says that all this is complete nonsense. Grace tells her to think about why they came so quickly, because her mother didn't even stop her from leaving the banquet hall. The girl asks a rhetorical question whether she thinks that the Duchess of Manhwa did this out of great confidence and trust in her daughter. Ionel starts using magic and tells Grace to shut up. Another demonic beast is already preparing to attack her. Reinkel uses wind magic again to protect Grace. Ionel is shocked by the speed of this demonic monster's disappearance. Reinkel directs his power at Ionel. The girl tries to resist the wind currents, which cause her small cuts. She falls to her knees before them, completely exhausted. Grace points her sword, which she has used many times in battle, at Ionel's shoulder, saying that as soon as she dared to summon demonic monsters, and for this she could lose her head. She swings at her, raising her sword above her head. Ionel begins to shout an ancient spell. Reinkel moves her with the help of wind magic, and the girl herself pronounces an ancient spell and shouts its name out loud at the top of her lungs. She suddenly realizes that it didn't work, and she's not even in the same room she was just in. Everyone around starts discussing the fact that she cast an ancient spell, surprised by her shabby appearance. The girl's face immediately changes, and people continue to find evidence pointing to her guilt, noticing the mana stone in her hand, which has become terribly dark. This mana stone shatters right in her hand into tiny pieces. Reinkel says that Ionel Manaska is involved in everything. The Empress orders that she be captured immediately and as quickly as possible. The woman asks Grace to explain to her what just happened. Grace says that they ran outside to look for where the demonic creatures came from, but they found Ionel Manaska, who the demonic monsters did not think to attack. Reinkel adds that demonic monsters do not attack only their master, which is why they thought that Ionel summoned them. Grace says that's why they decided to follow her, and then they discovered something much more serious. The girl says that they found a labyrinth there, a spell, to the search for which Wilhelm was the first to devote his life. Grace says that the labyrinth is connected to one room in the palace, but they have already all witnessed that Ionel used an ancient spell. Duchess Ionel listens silently to everything, not trying to insult or interrupt Grace. Grace says that Ionel is responsible for both the missing people and her sister's kidnapping, and she will personally lay out the details of all her crimes once and for all. The Duchess of Manaska calls her daughter a pathetic fool, but Ionel still calls her in a drawn-out voice, calling her mother. Duchess Manaska raises her fan higher and asks how she dares to call her mother after she has broken the sacred law of all mages and tarnished the reputation of House Manaska. She yells at her daughter, saying that she is out of her mind. Grace, looking at this picture, thinks that she has decided to abandon her daughter. Ionel Manaska was interrogated on charges of treason. The Duke told of Kadia's abduction and proposed to Her Majesty that their house, Winoston, lead the investigation into House Manaska's case. The Duchess of Manaska agreed to this proposal. Ionel is very surprised by what she sees. She is very happy to see her mother, affectionately calling her mother. The Duchess says that she didn't order her to stay by her side at the banquet. Ionel says that she did as Tristan told her, but they wanted to accuse the Archduke and the House of Winoston of treason. Duchess Manaska says that she fully deserves it, since she simply followed Tristan's orders without thinking about the consequences. She tells her daughter that at least this way she won't cause her any trouble. The woman turns to Tristan to ask if he thinks he is the smartest, but she gives him a chance to show himself as the heir of the family, for which Tristan thanks her. The Duchess of Manaska says that they must now sort everything out, and Tristan asks what she is talking about. She tells him that in order for power to pass to a new ruler, someone must overthrow the old one and orders them to be killed, since there is no longer any reason to hesitate.